Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into something muddy, bloody and a little bit smoky, because you just got drafted into the American Civil War. That's right. Your cozy, pillow-filled life, gone. You're now property of the Union or Confederate Army, depending on where you live, and you're about to get very familiar with the taste of black powder and the sound of dysentery. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this, but hey, that's kind of the point. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Seriously. Now, what time is it where you are? And which city are you watching from? I want to know how far this little thought experiment is reaching. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a knock on the door, or maybe a flyer slapped up at the town square. You, a fairly regular person living in 1860s America, aren't looking for trouble. You're just trying to run the family store, or work the field, or keep your apprentices in line at the forge. And yet, trouble finds you in the form of a conscription notice. If you're in the North, they call it the Enrollment Act of 1863. If you're in the South, it hits a bit earlier, 1862, and it's the first draft in American history. Either way, unless you're rich, influential, or blessed with the right disease, you're going to war. And no, you can't just opt out. In the North, there's an escape hatch. You can pay $300 to dodge service or send a substitute in your place. That's more than a year's salary for most people, so good luck. The South lets plantation owners skip the draft if they own more than 20 slaves. Yes, really. That little gem of a policy becomes so hated, they start calling it a rich man's war and a poor man's fight. You're probably the poor man. The letter feels oddly official, even if it's smudged and delivered by some sweaty teenager. It tells you to report to the nearest recruitment centre by the end of the week. You can't sleep that night, or the next. You walk around town trying to process it, watching your neighbours avoid your gaze. Some of them already have their own letters. A few are weirdly excited, most are terrified. Maybe you're one of those kids who thought the war would be over by Christmas. It won't. Maybe your uncle says it'll be a grand adventure. It isn't. One guy from your county already left and came back in a box. Open casket wasn't an option. At home, you break the news to your family. Your mother tries to hold it together. Your father nods slowly, like he expected this. Your younger sibling stares at you like you're already gone. You promise to write. You promise to come back. You lie. Now begins the countdown. A few days to pack what little you'll carry: a comb, maybe a pocket Bible if you're religious, a tin cup, wool socks. You don't need to bring a weapon. They'll give you one, assuming the armory isn't running low again. You don't get a uniform until later. At this point, you still look like a civilian, even though you aren't one anymore. You leave before sunrise. That feels less dramatic than you thought it would. The sky is pink and quiet. You carry a sack over your shoulder and try not to look back. You reach the muster point and meet the other unlucky souls. Some are your age. Some are way too young. One guy has clearly lied about being 15. Another limps on a bad leg and hopes no one notices. Everyone's pretending to be brave. A sergeant who has seen too much yells at you within the first 10 minutes. You're not standing straight enough. You're not responding fast enough. You're not calling him sir, even though that's technically incorrect. Officers are sir, not sergeants. But you don't know that yet. You don't know a lot of things yet. They put you through a medical exam. It's quick and mostly for show. A quick glance at your teeth, your fingers, your ability to breathe without collapsing. If you can walk and carry a rifle, you're in. Some people fake medical conditions trying to get out of it. You consider it, but it's too late now. Here's your historical fact for the night. During the Civil War, both sides allowed substitutes to be hired in place of draftees. Some career substitutes made a living off this, collecting payment after payment before skipping town or deserting. One man reportedly enlisted and collected bounties more than 30 times. And now for something weirder. One Union soldier, William Scott, was sentenced to death for falling asleep at his post. President Lincoln personally pardoned him. But just days later, Scott was killed in battle. It's like fate called collect and he couldn't say no. Now, a little scholarly mystery for you. Historians still debate whether conscription actually made a big difference in total troop numbers. Volunteering was so high early in the war that many argue the draft was more symbolic than functional, at least at first. Of course, as casualties mounted, the draft became a bit less symbolic and a lot more mandatory. You wait around for hours that feel like days, doing almost nothing except being yelled at. Eventually you're herded onto a wagon or a train headed for basic training. It smells like manure and coal smoke, and your stomach turns as the landscape blurs past. Somewhere in the distance you see a farmhouse and wonder if you'll ever sit at a table like that again. Someone tries to start a song. Others join in nervously, not quite remembering all the words. You pretend to know the tune just to feel less alone. When the song ends, no one speaks for a long time. You're already thinking about survival. Who's going to die first, how you'll know when your number's up, whether the people back home will even get your name right if it's carved on a gravestone. You start chewing on a piece of jerky that tastes like leather. This is your first meal as a soldier. It won't be the worst. Or the last, hopefully. You arrive at camp just after sunset, and the air already smells like firewood, sweat, and something vaguely rotten. This is where it all begins, your real departure from the life you knew. They herd you and the other new recruits off the wagon with barking voices, no introduction. Just move, and don't drop your gear. You barely get time to look around before someone's thrusting a bedroll into your arms and pointing to a row of sagging tents that look like they've seen better days. Spoiler, they haven't. Your new home? A canvas tent shared with 5 strangers and whatever creatures have decided to claim squatters' rights. You toss your sack in a corner and introduce yourself to your tent mates. There's Levi, the barrel-chested farm kid with a nervous laugh. Then Jesse, wiry and suspiciously quiet. Next, a schoolteacher named Franklin who talks too much and seems to think war is just a matter of discipline. Rounding it out is Amos, already lying down with his boots on, snoring like a busted stovepipe. No one's eager to unpack, probably because unpacking makes it real. That night, you try to sleep, but the noises don't stop. Men coughing, horses braying, boots crunching across dirt. Someone's already crying in the tent next to yours, and just when you start to drift off, wham! A cannon fires somewhere in the distance. No battle, just practice, or intimidation. Maybe both. You sit up straight, heart pounding like a snare drum, and realise just how far from home you are. Morning comes with a bugle call that feels like a personal attack. You stumble into the cold air, barely coherent, and line up for roll call. One guy's missing already. No one says anything, but you notice an officer writing a name down. Later you'll learn that desertion is constant. Some people just vanish. Most get caught. A few get hanged. Then comes your favourite part. Drills. All day. Every day. You march forward. You march backward. You load, aim, and fire your musket over and over until your fingers feel permanently blackened from powder. The sergeant keeps calling you green and soft, which, to be fair, is entirely accurate. Every time someone drops a musket or fumbles the manual of arms, everyone does push-ups in the mud. Group punishment builds unity, they say. All it really builds is resentment. Let's talk gear. They finally give you your uniform, sort of. It fits like it was made for someone else, because it was. The wool itches in places you didn't know could itch. Your shoes, they're identical for left and right feet. That's not a joke. You're expected to break them in, which basically means develop permanent blisters. Socks. If you have 2, you're already above average. And then there's the musket, a Springfield model 1861 maybe, if you're lucky. It's a single-shot muzzle-loading weapon, and loading it involves 9 separate steps, which you must perform while someone is possibly trying to kill you. You practice until your hands ache. But you're still too slow. Everyone is. The goal isn't speed exactly, it's rhythm, volleys, unified firepower. The concept is beautiful in theory, terrifying in execution. Here's your historical nugget for the night. The average Civil War soldier stood about 5'8" and weighed around 145 pounds. Not because they were all fitness buffs, because nutrition was a disaster and childhood diseases took a toll. You probably showed up for war already slightly underweight and half exhausted. And something on the quirky side, a few northern regiments actually wore Zouave uniforms, based on French Algerian infantry, featuring bright red pants, sashes and short open jackets. Nothing like being dressed like a circus act while bullets fly past your head. Surprisingly, they were proud of it. Style over stealth, apparently. Now here's your scholarly debate for the night. Historians still argue over just how effective training camps actually were. Some say they instilled discipline and cohesion, laying the foundation for success in battle. Others think the camps were disorganised, disease-ridden, and often more harmful than helpful, especially when drills didn't simulate the chaos of real fighting. By the end of your first week, your body hurts in places you never thought possible. Your shoulders ache from carrying a musket that weighs 9 pounds unloaded. Your feet are a mess of swelling and raw skin. You've developed a deep distrust of army stew, which somehow tastes both burnt and undercooked at the same time. Rumour has it someone found a button in their bowl. You believe it. There are moments, though, where camaraderie sneaks in. One night, Levi shares a story about chasing chickens back on the farm. Franklin hums a hymn under his breath while he sharpens his knife. Jesse finally cracks a smile when someone passes around a harmonica. Amos snores, of course, but it's starting to sound like a lullaby. You also learn to spot the lifers, the men who've been at this a while and somehow keep surviving. They walk with a different rhythm, more alert, less hopeful. One of them teaches you how to waterproof your shoes with tallow and crushed charcoal. Another shows you how to use hardtack as a hammer. It's that dense. Then comes inspection. Officers walk down the line, staring you down like you're a horse they're thinking of buying. They check your gear. They check your rifle. They glance at your posture. You stand as still as possible, hoping not to draw attention. One guy gets chewed out for scuffed boots, another for not shaving. You pass, barely, though the captain tells you to tighten that chin up, whatever that means. The nights start getting colder. Your tent leaks in one corner, and you take turns sleeping on the dry side. Lice are now a permanent part of your social circle. You try not to scratch, but it's hopeless. One guy jokes that the lice are organising by rank. You laugh even though it itches like hell. And somewhere in all this, mud, drilling, yelling, you start to get used to it. Not comfortable, but functional. You walk straighter, you curse with more creativity. You can now load your musket blindfolded and half asleep, which is good, because that's often when you'll need to. By the time the sergeant announces you're shipping out to the front, you're equal parts relieved and terrified. No more drills, no more tents, now it's real. You'll be marching toward actual combat, toward cannon blasts and a musket fire, toward a very real chance of dying. But you pack your gear anyway, help your tent mates fold canvas, and take one last look around the camp. It wasn't home, but for a little while, it was the closest thing you had. The order comes just after dawn, shouted by a courier who looks like he's been riding all night. "Strike camp," he yells, and just like that, everything pond trenches. What little routine you'd built, gone. The drills, the yelling, the bugle calls that somehow became tolerable, now they're replaced with a new rhythm, the urgency of movement. You roll up your sodden tent, shove it into your already overloaded knapsack, and choke down a breakfast of cold beans and soggy cornbread. Someone mutters, "Last real food we'll see for a while?" You hope he's wrong, he isn't. The march begins with a jolt, literally. Your regiment moves out in columns, boots hitting the earth like a war drum, muskets slung over aching shoulders. The pack on your back feels like it's been filled with bricks and broken dreams. It cuts into your shoulders with every step, and you're not even an hour in before you start sweating through your shirt. You look around trying to gauge how everyone else is holding up. Franklin's glasses are already fogged. Levi's humming something tuneless. Jesse keeps adjusting his hat like that'll help. Amos just walks like a man who's already halfway dead. The first few miles feel manageable, almost optimistic. But that fades fast, the sun climbs, the roads get worse, and you begin to understand what soldiers mean when they talk about the march, like it's its own kind of battle. You slog through mud thick enough to steal your boots over your gravel that chews through thin leather soles, and past the bloated carcasses of horses that didn't make it. The stench clings to everything. Around noon the line halts, not because it's break time, brakes don't exist, but because a wagon up ahead broke an axle. You drop to the ground, muscles screaming, and try to rest. A sergeant wanders past and mutters, "This ain't even the hard part." You'd glare at him if your eyelids weren't so heavy. Instead, you sip from your canteen, which is already half empty, and mentally calculate how many sips you can afford for the rest of the day. Here's your historical tidbit to chew on. Civil War soldiers often marched 15-20 miles a day, sometimes more during a campaign. And these weren't power walks through the park. They were grueling, often barefoot slogs over broken roads, steep hills and swamps. Shoes wore out fast, socks even faster. Marching became a form of torture you couldn't escape. For a bit of twisted colour, consider this. Some troops, when desperate, would literally steal boots off dead comrades during a march. If someone dropped from heatstroke or dysentery and looked like they weren't getting up, well, footwear was a limited resource. Morality tends to bend when your feet are bleeding. Now for the ongoing historical debate. Military historians still argue whether these constant long marches actually made troops tougher or just broke them down quicker. Some believe endurance was forged in pain, giving men the stamina needed for battle. Others point to how many regiments were crippled by foot injuries, malnutrition, and pure exhaustion before they ever fired a shot. After the wagon's fixed, you press on. It gets hotter. Dust clogs your throat and sweat makes your shirt stick to your back like a second, slightly mouldy skin. Every time you pass a creek, someone tries to refill their canteen. Some officers allow it, some don't. Enemy could be anywhere, be it before just to remind you. Stay alert. But it's hard to feel paranoid when your biggest enemy right now is your own body. By the time evening rolls around, you've marched close to 18 miles. You can barely see straight. The world feels like it's vibrating, and then someone stumbles, just collapses, face first into the dirt. A medic rushes in, but it's clear the guy's not getting back up today. Maybe tomorrow, maybe never. The column doesn't stop. You just step around him and keep walking. You don't even look back. Eventually you reach a clearing and are told to make camp. You want to cry from relief, but that would cost energy you don't have. You drop your gear like it's trying to kill you, because it kind of is, and flop onto the grass. You'd kill for a bath, or a chair, or any sensation that doesn't involve aching muscles. Instead, you get army stew again. Same taste as before, burnt salt and disappointment. Franklin tries to joke about his blisters. Jesse curses every god he can think of. Levi pulls off his boots and groans when he sees the state of his toes. You consider eating one of your last hardtack biscuits, then decide your teeth aren't worth the risk. Instead, you lie back staring at the stars, feeling every beat of your pulse like it's echoing through your bones. You think about home, how far it already feels, the fields you used to walk across, the porch you used to sit on, the people you left behind. You wonder if they're thinking of you. You wonder if they'll recognise you when, or if, you return. The next day, you do it all again, and the day after that, and the day after that. Your feet begin to develop what old-timers call marcher's foot. Raw, torn skin toughening into hard patches. You walk like your legs have been replaced with stone columns. It hurts, but you keep going, because stopping means falling behind. And falling behind, well, let's just say officers don't have much patience for stragglers. A few get tied to wagons. One gets whipped. No one says a word. Somewhere along the road, you pass a farm that's been burned out. Chimney standing like a gravestone, barn collapsed, fences splintered. You don't know who did it. Union troops? Confederate raiders? Could have been either. Both sides burned plenty. You spot a child's toy in the dirt. A wooden horse, half charred, no people in sight. You hear the word enemy more often now. The officers are tense. Scouts ride ahead and return with tight expressions. You clean your musket during rest breaks. Your tent mates do the same, everyone growing a little quieter, a little more inward. Something's coming. You can feel it like pressure behind your eyes. And then one morning, as the fog still clings to the trees and the air smells like wet iron, the order comes. Prepare for engagement. You grip your musket, your heart stutters. Levy turns pale. Jesse's fingers twitch like they're looking for something to grab. Franklin starts reciting something under his breath. It sounds like a poem, but you can't make it out. Amos, for once, is silent. The road has brought you here. You're about to find out what all the marching was for. Dawn creeps over the horizon, like it's trying not to wake anyone. The sky goes from steel grey to a dull, washed-out gold, and the birds in the trees chirp with complete indifference to the fact that you might be about to die. The woods around the road are eerily still, and even the usual camp noise, the coughing, the cursing, the clatter of boots, is quieter than usual, so everyone feels it. The tension, the weight pressing down on your chest. The way time seems to slow, like it's giving you just a little more room to dread what's coming. You and your regiment are positioned just beyond a low ridge. Orders come down in bursts, garbled and half-shouted. Officers pace back and forth, squinting through spyglasses and looking as anxious as you feel. You hear artillery rumbling in the distance, just far enough to seem unreal, like thunder from another world. But it's real, and it's getting closer. You're told to load your weapon and wait for the signal. So you do. The musket is heavier now somehow. Your fingers don't move like they did during drills. You fumble the cartridge, tear it open with your teeth, pour in the powder, ram down the ball, and pull back the hammer. You've done this 100 times, but never with your hands shaking like this. Around you, the others are just as quiet. You glance at Levi. He's mumbling something to himself. Jesse's face is blank. Franklin has a pale sweat blooming on his brow. Amos is chewing on a piece of bark, of all things. his jaw working like a mule grinding oats, and then the signal comes, a single blast from a bugle, sharp and cold. Officers shout, the column begins to move, you start walking down the ridge through the clearing into the trees, and that's when it hits you. You're not marching now, you're advancing into battle. The first volley doesn't come with warning, just a sudden crack, 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 like the sky ripping open, and men ahead of you are already falling. Someone screams, someone else throws up. You duck without meaning to and scramble forward behind a log. Your heart feels like it's going to punch its way out of your ribs. This isn't a drill, this isn't pretend, this is it. You fire your first shot and you have no idea if it hits anything. You're not aiming, you're not even thinking. You just go through the motions, load, aim, fire. The smoke is everywhere, thick and white, stinging your eyes and choking your lungs. You can barely see 10 feet in front of you. Shadows move through the haze, friend, foe. No time to figure it out, you reload. Here's your historical fact for this moment. Most Civil War firefights involved soldiers standing in open lines, exchanging volleys across 50 to 100 yards. Tactics hadn't caught up to technology yet. Muskets were more accurate than ever. But armies still fought like it was 1812. The result? Absolute carnage. Something strange happens in the smoke. You start to lose your sense of time. You're not sure if it's been 5 minutes or 50. You shoot, reload, shoot again. A man to your left drops, shot through the neck. He doesn't scream, he just collapses like someone cut a string. You want to help. You can't, you keep firing. Nearby, someone runs. Not a charge, a retreat. He breaks and sprints back through the trees. A second later, he's down too, maybe a bullet, maybe tripped and snapped something. You don't know. You just stay low. Now, for a weird little footnote, there are accounts of soldiers being so terrified during their first firefight that they'd load the same musket multiple times without firing. Powder and ball layered on top of each other in a useless, dangerous mess. One musket recovered after Gettysburg had over 20 charges jammed into the barrel. Pure panic. At some point, the order comes to fall back. You barely hear it over the din, but the line around you starts pulling away. You run, musket clutched tight, legs barely working, heart still hammering. You leap over a fallen log and crash into the underbrush. You don't stop until someone grabs your shoulder and yanks you down behind a ridge. You're safe. For now, your hands are shaking so badly you can't pour water from your canteen. You're covered in grime, sweat, powder, mud, and something that might be blood. You hope it's not yours. You check yourself and find a shallow graze along your arm, but you're still whole, still breathing. Jesse's there too, so is Franklin. Levi limps over, clutching his leg, but he's standing. Amos is gone. No one saw where he went down. No one even knows if he went down. And you don't ask. The officers regroup, tallying casualties, making vague noises about holding the position. You don't hear much of it. You just sit there, staring at your hands, wondering how they could still look like yours after everything they just did. The sun climbs higher, burning off the fog. The battlefield smells like gunpowder, sweat, and something darker. Burnt cloth, open wounds, churned up soil soaked in blood. You catch a glimpse of a man lying face up in the clearing, eyes wide, mouth still open like he died mid-shout. You look away. And now for the scholarly debate of the night. Some historians argue that the first battle moment was the most formative for Civil War soldiers, the point where idealism burned away and survival instincts took over. Others argue that no single moment changed a man. It was the slow grind of days like this, one after another, that stripped humanity away. You're starting to believe both. As evening falls, you help dig a shallow trench. Not for defence, for the dead. There's no ceremony, no priest, no final words. Just a name if you're lucky, and a quick prayer under your breath. You drop in a piece of Amos's gear, his tin cup dented and blackened. It's all that's left. You sit by the fire that night, staring into the flames like they might offer answers. They don't, but they're warm. And for a moment, that's enough. The next morning starts with silence, which is somehow worse than cannon fire. The trees are still. The camp is hushed. The birds are back, chirping like nothing happened. And yet you wake up feeling like something is broken inside of you. You don't remember falling asleep, but you must have at some point, because your neck hurts from the angle you were slumped against that log. Your fingers are still curled, like you're holding your musket, even though it's lying in the dirt a few feet away. You stretch, but the aches aren't going anywhere. They're part of you now. After a breakfast of cold coffee and hardtack, which might as well be toasted gravel, you help with the clean-up. That means burying what's left of the gear, organising rations, and dragging what few wounded there are to the makeshift infirmary tent. One of the men from a nearby unit has a bayonet wound through his side and won't stop moaning. Another lost 2 fingers and keeps looking at his hand like it betrayed him. You keep your eyes down, do your part, and try not to think about the fact that Amos never turned up. Then comes the marching. Again, because apparently you don't get time to recover from your first real battle. You pack up your gear, hoist your musket, and fall in line. But this time the march feels different. There's no joking, no singing. The men walk like ghosts. Blisters have burst. Backs are bent. And for the first time it starts to really settle in. This is your life now. The roads are even worse after the rain. Mud pulls at your boots like it's trying to claim them. Wheels of the supply wagon sink so deep that entire regiments are pulled off duty just to help push. Your socks are soaked by mile 2. By mile 5 you stop feeling your toes entirely. Every few hours you stop to rest. You peel off your socks, squeeze out the water and shake out the lice. At this point they're more loyal companions than some of the officers. One guy in your company names his favourite louse Cornelius. He keeps it in a matchbox and talks to it like a pet. Be funny if you weren't pretty sure he's serious. Here's your historical side note. One of the biggest threats to Civil War soldiers wasn't bullets or bayonets. It was fit. Marching thousands of miles without proper footwear led to trench foot infections and amputations. Whole units were sidelined just from bad shoes. The army issued them by the pair, but they were straight-lasted, no left, no right. Just 2 identical bricks of leather you had to break in with the raw force of your own misery. And a quirky bit of trivia for you. Some soldiers swore by soaking their feet in whiskey at night to prevent blisters. The science is questionable, but the commitment to being in pain and drunk at the same time was undeniably creative. Now for the ongoing argument among historians. Was the constant movement, the marching, the relentless advance really necessary? Some believe it kept armies from stagnating, made them unpredictable, and kept pressure on the enemy. Others argue it led to unnecessary exhaustion and disease, killing more men with overexertion than the battles themselves. The truth, of course, is probably buried somewhere under the muddy tracks you're leaving behind. The road eventually winds through a burned-out village. Charred fences, smouldering chimneys, smashed windows. It doesn't look like a battle happened here. More like a punishment. Scorched earth, someone mutters. Total war. You don't know who lived here or which side did this. You just know it looks like hell. Your regiment bivouacs near what used to be a church, and the steeples collapsed. The pews turned into firewood. You sit on a broken bench and eat a handful of beans from a shared pot. No one speaks. Even the fire seems quieter. That night your boots finally fall apart. The sole peels back like a rotten banana, and you're forced to tie it with string and hope for the best. You'll need to beg for a new pair from supply, if they have any. If not, you'll march barefoot until your feet give out, and then you'll be left behind. And we all know what happens to those who get left behind. Franklin offers to patch your sock with a bit of twine he's been saving. It's a small thing, but it matters. In a world where everything is falling apart, a bit of kindness feels like a miracle. Jesse shares a strip of bacon he saved. Levi loans you a bit of grease to rub on your blistered heels. You've all seen the worst of each other now. No point pretending you're not just a bunch of scared, sore, mostly broken men hanging on by a thread. Later someone passes around a tin of coffee. It's barely more than brown water, but it's hot. You sip, stare into the fire, and try not to think too hard about what tomorrow will bring. Now and then you hear movement in the woods, twigs snapping, footsteps crunching, whispers that might be wind or something worse. You clutch your musket close and try to sleep, knowing full well you're dreaming about smoke and screaming. At some point in the night it starts to rain again. Not a soft, comforting drizzle, but a heavy, unrelenting downpour that turns the whole camp into a swamp. You wake up soaked, shivering and tangled in a wet blanket. You've never missed your bed more. Even the memory of it feels like something you made up. In the morning the sergeant informs you that you'll be moving again. No surprise there. You stand up, every muscle screaming. You pull on your half-dead boot, tie it tight with grim determination, and fall into line. The man in front of you is limping. The one behind you is coughing blood into a rag. You walk, and with every mile, the line between soldier and survivor gets thinner. It's early, but the air already smells like iron and ash. You don't need to be told, you can feel it in your teeth. in the cold knot in your stomach. Another battle is coming. It's been days since the last one, but that doesn't mean much. Time is slippery now, stretched out between marches and meals, compressed by adrenaline and dread. The orders come like they always do, brief-barked and completely lacking in comfort. You're to take position along the tree line and hold until the next command. That's it. Simple. Except, of course, it isn't. Your boots squish in the mud as you move out. They haven't dried in 3 days. The inside feels like a swamp. Blisters have merged into one long aching stretch of raw skin. You ignore it. There's no other choice. You load your musket with shaking fingers and take your spot in the line. Trees ahead, flat field between you and them, somewhere beyond that, enemy lines. You can't see them, but you know they're out there, doing the same thing. Loading, waiting, sweating. Then suddenly, it's chaos. A whistle in the air, a high, screaming arc, and this ground erupts 10 feet in front of you. Dirt, grass, and something red fly into the air. Artillery, cannons. They're zeroing in fast. You duck instinctively as if that'll help. Franklin doesn't duck fast enough. The explosion knocks him backward into the mud, arms flung wide like he's making a snow angel. His eyes are open, staring at the clouds like he's still trying to make sense of them. You don't check if he's breathing. You already know. The captain shouts to advance, and your legs move before your brain catches up. You rush forward, yelling something that barely qualifies as human. The rest of the line moves too, a living wave of wool and fear. You can't hear your own voice over the thunder of musket fire and the boom of cannons. Smoke rolls over the field in thick, choking clouds. Visibility drops to a few feet. You keep moving. You fire, reload, fire again. You're not thinking about strategy. You're thinking about staying upright. You trip over something, someone. A soldier, face down, legs twitching. You don't stop. Someone screams behind you, but you don't turn round. In battle, every second you spend caring is a second you could get shot. You move because you have to, because stopping means dying. Here's your historical fact for the evening. In major Civil War battles, casualty rates were often staggering. At Antietam, over 22,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or missing in a single day. That's more than the total American losses on D-Day. It's hard to wrap your mind around that until you're standing ankle-deep in blood-soaked earth, watching friends drop beside you like shattered dolls. At one point you run out of cartridge. You dig into your cartridge box with trembling hands, praying there's one more tucked in the corner. There is. You load it with hands that barely function, fingers slick with sweat and mud. You fire. You reload. You stop trying to count your shots. Levi is still next to you, face streaked with powder, eyes wild. He shouts something, maybe a warning, maybe a prayer, but you can't hear him. Everything is muffled now, like you're underwater. You nod anyway, just to show you're still there. Then comes the charge. Someone screams, "Bayonets!" And before you can fully process it, you're running. Not just walking or advancing, you're sprinting, musket clutched like a spear, straight into a mess of faces and bodies and metal, time fractures. You collide with a man who's just as terrified as you are, and for a second you both freeze. Then instinct kicks in. The musket is useless now. You swing it like a club. Feel this jolt run up your arms as it connects with something soft. You don't look. You shove, elbow, twist away. You feel the heat of someone's breath against your ear, then the flash of movement, and suddenly you're on the ground. You roll, dirt grinding into your back. You kick. Something heavy slams into your ribs. You lose your breath. You reach for your belt knife. It's not there. A hand grabs your collar and yanks you halfway up. Jesse. He pulls you to your feet, shouts something you can't make out, and drags you behind a felled tree. You nod at him, chest heaving, ribs streaming. He nods back. The two of you stay there, catching your breath as the line begins to break. You can see it happening. Your regiment folding like wet paper. The centre is collapsing, men retreating in clumps, some limping, some running outright. An officer tries to rally the line but gets shot mid-sentence. The sound he makes is something you'll hear in your sleep for the rest of your life. Eventually, the retreat order comes. It's not yelled, it's whispered, passed from man to man like a guilty secret. You and Jesse make your way back through the smoke and bodies, following the others. You trip 3 times, once over a rock, once over a corpse, and once over nothing at all. Your legs just give out for a moment and you collapse, coughing and gasping. Jesse helps you up again, wordlessly. Back behind the lines, the medics are already swamped. Piles of bandages, pools of blood. You sit down on a rock, hands trembling. You don't realise you're crying until you taste it on your lips. And now for a peculiar little footnote. Civil War soldiers often reported that time slowed down during combat. It's a real psychological effect. Your brain goes into hyperdrive, logging every detail. You remember things with ridiculous clarity. The stitching on a fallen soldier's coat, the way a cannonball kicked up a puff of purple flowers, the exact tone of an officer's last words. The scholarly debate for this section, whether bayonet charges were actually effective or mostly theatrical. Some argue that most enemy lines broke before bayonets made contact. No one wanted to fight hand to hand. Others say bayonet wounds were common and horrific, especially in close quarters. Either way, when someone yells charge, you don't wait around to see who's bluffing. Night falls, you can't sleep. You don't even try. You sit next to Jesse and sip coffee that tastes like boiled dirt. You think about Franklin, about Amos, about the man whose face you never saw but who now exists in your nightmares. Your fingers are cut, your ribs hurt, your body is alive, but you're not sure the same can be said for your mind. And still, somehow, you survived your first full-scale battle. You wake up with the taste of ash in your mouth and a stiffness in your spine, like you've aged 20 years overnight. There's a fog creeping in from the river nearby, coiling through camp like a ghost, soft and silver. Somewhere, a soldier is coughing so hard it sounds like he's trying to spit out a lung. Another one is vomiting. You're not sure if it's from fear, fever, or the army stew. You sit up, wince, and feel the full body ache settle back in like an unwelcome friend. It's not the sharp pain of wounds. This is the dull, constant grind of a body pushed past its limits, trying to keep itself from falling apart. This morning no one speaks much. Not because they're tired, though they are, but because you've all entered that quiet stretch of misery soldiers know too well. The downtime after battle. It's not peace, it's just the eye of the hurricane. You spend most of it in a haze, trying not to think about what you saw and did. You clean your rifle for the third time. You boil your socks over the fire to kill whatever lives in them now. You sort through what little gear you have left. You find a bullet lodged in your knapsack, flattened, bent, but terrifyingly real. You run your fingers over it. 1 inch higher and it would have ended you. By mid-morning, you're assigned latrine duty. You thought battle was bad. It turns out digging holes for other men to relieve themselves is a whole new level of personal horror. The cell is industrial. The flies are bold, numerous, and immune to shame. You spend 2 hours waist-deep in stench, swatting bugs and wondering how anyone could possibly glamorize war. Here's your historical tidbit. During the Civil War, more soldiers died from disease than from gunfire. Dysentery, typhoid fever, and pneumonia were rampant. Poor sanitation, spoiled food, and bad water made every camp a petri dish of death. Some regiments lost half their numbers to illness before ever seeing combat. You feel that statistic in your gut now, literally. You get a break around noon, which is generous by army standards. You sit in the shade with Jesse and Levi, chewing on hardtack and sipping coffee made from reused grounds. It tastes like a regret. Levi cracks a smile and pulls out a tiny metal spoon he scavenged from a Union supply crate. Silver-plated, he says, winking. Fancy eating now. It's a Berchtgeber, you laugher anyway. In this world, small things matter. A warm spoon, a working zipper. A pair of socks without holes, and speaking of socks, here comes your fringe fact. Soldiers were so desperate to avoid disease and foot rot that they'd trade just about anything for clean socks. Tobacco, extra cartridges, even coffee beans. There are stories of men stealing them off sleeping comrades. One soldier reportedly stole 4 pairs during the night and buried them to keep anyone else from claiming them. You understand, you'd consider doing the same. After lunch, if you can call it that, you get called for inspection. It's not about discipline, really. It's about appearances. Your captain wants to make sure the unit looks intact, even if half of you are limping and the rest have 1,000-yard stares. You line up, brush the mud off your sleeves and try not to sway from the dizziness that's been creeping in since morning. Your skin feels hot, your lips dry. You suspect something is brewing in your chest. A cold or something worse. And here comes the open question scholars love to kick around. How much did the lack of medical knowledge really contribute to soldier deaths? Some argue it was more fatal than the enemy's bullets. Others claim that field hospitals improved significantly by mid-war. You wouldn't know, you haven't seen a hospital yet. But you have seen enough men coughing blood into their shirts to feel like the statistics are probably generous. By late afternoon, the heat turns sticky. You drag your boots toward the river and take your canteen to refill it. The water's cloudy, but at least it's moving. There's no filtration. You're told to boil it, but no one really has time or fuel. You take the risk. Everyone does. It's either that or collapse from dehydration. Back at camp, you find a quiet spot and try to write a letter home. Your hands tremble on the page. You start with "Dear Mother," then stare at the words for a long time. What are you supposed to say? Everything's fine? It's not. I miss home? That one's true, but it feels so small now. You end up writing something vague about the weather, the camaraderie, the march. You fold the letter and give it to the courier, hoping it makes it out. Letters often don't. Evening falls with the sound of distant gunfire. Not close enough to worry about, just enough to make sleep harder. You and Jessie build a small fire and huddle close. You talk about dumb things, home, food, to old girls, anything but what's in front of you. At one point, Jessie admits he's forgotten what his sister's voice sounds like. You nod. You know that feeling. Your memories are starting to blur at the edges. You lie down, pull your blanket over you and stare up at the stars. They're the only part of this whole nightmare that still feel real. The same stars that watched over you as a kid. The same ones shining over home. It's almost enough to trick you into thinking you're safe. Almost. But the coughing returns. Not yours, yet, but from every corner of the camp. Wet, hacking, endless. You know the sound now. It's the sound of disease setting in, and you're just hoping it skips you. The last thing you hear before drifting off is a medic muttering, "He's not going to make it through the night." You don't know who he's talking about. You don't ask. You just close your eyes and pray to be someone else's problem tomorrow. You wake to the sharp crack of a rifle, not in battle, but in camp. A single shot, sudden and final, echoing through the fog. That gets you sitting upright. Heart already pounding, hand grasping for your musket out of instinct. But there's no follow-up volley, no shouting, no bugle, just the heavy silence afterward and the muttering of groggy voices all around you, wondering what just happened. Then you hear someone say it, low and grim. Private Johnson took his own head off, just like that, flat, blunt, no emotion. The sergeant confirms it an hour later when roll is called. One less name to read, one less boot print in the mud. You didn't know Johnson well, he was in a neighbouring company, but you saw him once, skinny kid with a lopsided smile, always humming some tune under his breath. And now he's a part of the silence. The officers don't say much about it. Just a quiet order to dispose of the body and get back to routine. You and Jessie share a look. There's no outrage, just tired understanding. You get it. You all do. Sometimes the noise in your own head is louder than anything the battlefield can offer. And sometimes the only way out feels like pulling a trigger. You eat breakfast slowly. A ration of salt pork and a biscuit that's half moulded. It doesn't matter. You chew anyway. Taste is no longer part of the experience. The food is fuel and punishment all at once. You drink coffee that tastes like it was brewed through an old sock. It might have been. Levi cracks another joke that doesn't land. Jessie doesn't laugh this time. Mail call happens before midday. A few letters arrive. One of them's for you. You feel a twinge of something that almost resembles emotion, until you open it and find that it's just a note from your cousin, asking if you've seen any action yet, and whether you can send back any souvenirs. You fold it up carefully and shove it deep into your knapsack without answering. You try not to take it personally. They don't understand. They can't. Here's your historical fact for the night. Mail was one of the few comforts Civil War soldiers had. The US Army postal system expanded rapidly during the war to accommodate the massive flow of letters. More than 8 million were sent each month. For many, mail call was the only reminder that life still existed outside the mud and blood. And now for a little fringe story. Some soldiers became minor celebrities among their units for the letters they received. One man in the Union Army supposedly got a letter every week from 7 different sweethearts and read them aloud like cereals around the campfire. Till, of course, all 7 showed up at once during a home furlough. That was awkward. Today your unit isn't marching. Not because they're being kind, but because several of the men are too sick to stand. The medics set up a quarantine zone downwind from the main tents. You hear the groans, the wet coughing, the muttered prayers. You recognise one of the voices, Corporal Harrow, who used to polish his boots even after they fell apart. He won't be needing them anymore. Here's the debate historians love to pick apart. Why were Civil War camps so catastrophically unsanitary? Was it lack of medical knowledge, poor leadership, or just logistical failure on a massive scale? The answer is probably yes to all of the above. Germ theory was still a new idea, sanitation was spotty, and moving massive numbers of people through swamps and forests during wartime, not exactly a recipe for hygiene. That afternoon, you're told to help dig latrine trenches again. It's not glamorous, but it beats carrying stretchers to the infirmary. The ground is soft from rain, and every shovel of earth you toss releases a puff of steam and a stench so foul it makes your eyes water. You cover your mouth with a rag and try not to gag. Jessie works beside you, silent except for the occasional cough. Not the kind that signals sickness, at least not yet. Later you're assigned to clean your weapon again. Not because it's dirty, but because idle hands are dangerous here. You break down the musket with practiced ease. Swab the barrel, oil the trigger, check the bayonet for cracks. It's meditative in its own way. A task with rules, predictable. Not like everything else, you hear a commotion from the quarantine zone. A man is screaming, no words, just raw primal noise. It lasts for several minutes before falling suddenly quiet. You stare at the trees and try to let your mind drift anywhere else. You remember a girl from back home who used to work in the bakery. She had flour on her sleeves and laughed with her whole face. You don't remember her name now, just the sound of her laugh. That somehow hits harder than a bullet. By evening, your company gathers for roll. The numbers are shrinking. Franklin gone. Amos gone. Johnson dead by his own hand. Corporal Harrow listed as unresponsive. There's no time to mourn them individually. The sergeant reads the names, and you answer here, when yours comes up, even though you feel like less of you is here than yesterday. You get a brief moment of calm after supper. Jessie pulls out a harmonica and plays a slow, mournful tune. It's not good. Notes stumble over each other, but the emotion's there. Levi sings quietly along. No one tells him to stop. It's the first song you've heard in days. The fire burns low, casting soft orange glows on your faces. You sip the last of your coffee and try not to think about how thin it's getting. Supplies are running low. The quartermaster says reinforcements are coming. He also said that last week. Your final task of the day is simple: guard duty. You're posted near the edge of camp, musket in hand, eyes straining in the dark. The woods are full of night sounds. Owls, twigs cracking, wind shifting through the brush. Every noise sounds like a footstep. Every shape could be a man. You stay alert for the first hour, adrenaline keeping you sharp. The second hour drags. Your knees ache. Your eyes blur. The third hour, you're barely awake. You slap your own face just to stay conscious. At some point you think you see something move in the trees. You raise your musket, finger on the trigger. It's a deer. Just a deer. You lower your weapon, heart hammering, and whisper, "Keep moving, friend." The deer vanishes into the trees, silent as smoke. You envy it more than you'd ever admit. By now you've discovered the cruelest twist of life as a Civil War soldier. The worst days aren't always the ones filled with gunfire. Sometimes it's the waiting that breaks you. Today is one of those days, no marching, no fighting, no orders worth noting. Just a camp full of filthy, half-starved men sitting around in what's essentially organised boredom. You find yourself cleaning your already clean weapon, again, because it's either that or start counting the bugs crawling across your blanket. They're winning in both speed and population. There's a rhythm to the idleness. Morning passes slow, like molasses on a cold plate. You sit on a stump with Jessie and Levi, chewing on what might be the last edible piece of salt pork in existence. It tastes like sadness and pig. Levi swears he saw a real rabbit this morning, just out of reach. Jessie says that's probably a fever dream. You all laugh weakly. There's no real joy in it, just the kind of laugh that keeps your brain from melting out of your ears. The sun climbs high and hot, and with it comes the flies. They're bold now. You swat them away from your eyes, your food, the sore on your wrist that still hasn't healed. No one really knows what half these wounds are anymore. Some are from battle, some from boots, some from God knows what. You dab yours with whiskey. It burns like betrayal, but maybe it'll help. Here's your historical fact. In 1863, both armies spent more days waiting in camp than actually fighting. For the average soldier, war was 5% terror and 95% tedium. And when the bullets weren't flying, it was the boredom that got under your skin, made men reckless, violent, or just numb. And for your quirky footnote of the night, some Union camps actually had theatrical clubs. That's right. Soldiers would dress up in costumes, rehearse plays, and put on little dramas to lift morale. One regiment in Virginia even put on Othello using cast members dressed in curtains and soot for makeup. It was terrible. Everyone loved it. Unfortunately, your camp has no such entertainment tonight. What you do have is rumour, and it's spreading fast. There's a spy in the camp, someone whispers. You hear it by the fire, then again near the latrine, then again when a lieutenant shouts something about a missing map. You don't know if it's true, probably isn't, but truth matters less than belief. Everyone's watching each other now. Jesse mutters that he saw a guy wearing mismatched boots. Could be Confederate issue. Levi jokes that he saw someone reading a book without a cover. Obviously secret code. You laugh again, hollow and tired, but deep down you wonder. Not about the spy, about how easy it would be to fake your way out. Dress in grey, sneak across the line and pretend to be someone else. Someone better fed, maybe. Or someone with a bed. You wouldn't do it. Probably, but it's a tempting little daydream tucked between coffee sips and thoughts of home. And that brings you to the letters. You try writing again, this one to your brother. You start with, "I hope the harvest's going well," and immediately feel stupid. You scratch it out. Then try, "We're holding up fine," which is also a lie. Eventually you write, "Still alive. Tell Ma I miss her." That's all you can manage. You spend the afternoon listening to the noises of the camp. Men coughing, someone trying to play a banjo with 2 broken strings, the clink of tin cups, the occasional moan from the infirmary. You hear a preacher down there too, murmuring something about redemption. You wonder if it applies to people who've bayoneted another man through the chest. Probably not. You push the thought away. Late in the day, a patrol comes back with 2 chickens. Real ones. Levi cheers like they've found gold. Jesse volunteers to help cook, and the men crowd around the fire as the birds are plucked and stewed. It smells edible. You close your eyes and pretend it's home cooking. For a second, you swear it almost works. Dinner is the best you've had in weeks. Everyone eats like wolves. You suck meat off the bone like it's your last meal. It might be. You don't care. Grease coats your fingers and chin, and for once you don't even mind the flies. As dusk falls, someone brings out a deck of cards. The game is unclear, rules seem made up on the spot, but it's something to do with tossing in bits of tobacco and buttons as currency. You don't play, but you watch, amused. Levi keeps winning, Jesse keeps losing. Arguments erupt, but no one takes it seriously. For a few minutes, the war feels like a distant concept. Now for tonight's scholarly debate. What truly kept soldiers going between battles? Was it camaraderie? Faith? Letters from home? Some argue it was sheer inertia, the body moving forward even when the spirit couldn't. Others say the bonds formed in misery were stronger than anything back home. You don't know where you land on that yet, but you do know you wouldn't still be upright if not for the 2 men sitting next to you right now. Night arrives, and guard duty shifts are assigned. You're spared tonight. Jesse's not so lucky. He nods, shoulders his musket, and disappears into the dark with a yawn and a tired, "Wish me luck." You lie down on your blanket, staring up at a sky that looks too peaceful for the world you're living in. Stars blink above like they don't care. The ground beneath you is damp and cold, and the breeze smells like wet wool and gun oil. You close your eyes and let your mind wander. Not to home, not anymore, but to someplace completely unreal. A bed, a warm bath, clean socks, an entire roast chicken just for you. Your eyes flutter shut. The dream doesn't last, but the ache of wanting it follows you into sleep. You wake to shouting. Not the usual morning bark from the sergeant or the half-hearted grumbling of men rolling out of their bedrolls, but real shouting. Urgent, sharp, full of that electric panic you only hear when something's gone very wrong. You sit up fast, brain still foggy, hand already reaching for your musket like a reflex. Around you, others are doing the same. Levi's swearing under his breath. Jesse's already up, boots half-laced, peering toward the tree line where all the noise seems to be coming from. A scout stumbles into camp, soaked with sweat, eyes wide like he's seen the devil himself. "Raiders!" he gasps, doublings over. "Confederate scouts, cut through our perimeter. They're circling back, could be probing for weaknesses." The officer nearby doesn't wait for more. Orders go flying. "Form up! Get your weapons! Sentries to the north line!" The camp bursts into action like a kicked anthill. You scramble to your feet, jamming your blistered, half-rotted boots on, and grab your gear. Your musket isn't even loaded. You'd cleaned it the night before, left it open to dry. Your hands shake as you fumble the cartridge, spill half the powder, curse under your breath, and finally ram the ball home. You sling your haversack over your shoulder, not because you need it, but because you don't want to lose what little you have if this turns into a real engagement. You and your company move fast through the brush toward the edge of the forest where the scouts spotted movement. You expect gunfire at any second, a flash of grey uniforms, the crack of a musket, but when you arrive, there's nothing. Just broken branches, a discarded canteen, and a smear of blood on a tree trunk. You scan the woods, heart pounding. Nothing moves except the wind. Here's your historical fact for the moment. Both Union and Confederate armies relied heavily on scouts and skirmishers, small units sent ahead to gather intel, sabotage supply lines, or bait the enemy into chasing ghosts. It was a deadly job, often underpaid and under-recognized, but without them, entire armies would have marched blind into disaster. You fan out with your squad, sweeping the underbrush for signs of movement. The forest is thick and quiet, and every snapped twig sounds like a rifle shot. You breathe through your mouth to stay quiet, lips dry, finger near the trigger. Every squirrel, every shifting leaf sends a fresh jolt through your nerves. You feel like prey, hunted. Then Levi stops, raises a hand. You freeze. About 20 yards ahead, there's movement, fast, low to the ground. A figure bolts through the trees, too far to identify. Jesse raises his musket, but the officer growls, "Hold fire!" A beat later, the figure is gone. You sprint forward, searching, heart pounding, but there's nothing, just trampled grass and a single torn scrap of grey fabric snagged on a thorn bush. After another hour of searching, the captain calls it, "Pull back." You all do. Reluctantly, eyes still darting into the brush like something might leap out. Back at camp, everyone's on edge. No more joking, no singing, no letters being written. Just tight shoulders and quiet preparation. The camp is fortified, sort of. You dig shallow trenches, drag logs into makeshift barricades, double the guard posts. No one says it, but you all feel it. Something's coming. Now for your oddball historical tidbit. Some soldiers actually got recruited into temporary spy missions without even knowing it. One Union private was told to deliver a message to a local farmhouse. That farmhouse turned out to be deep behind enemy lines. He survived barely, and when he got back, his commander just said, "Good job. You're a natural. No thanks, no bonus. Just a pat on the back and a new fear of every unmarked road." Later that evening, an officer pulls you aside. Not just you, a handful of men, including Jesse, Levi, and 2 others from a neighbouring regiment. You're told reconnaissance detail. You'll leave at midnight. Quiet in, quiet out. Watch the ridgeline, report any movement. Just like that, you're now part of a scout team. You nod. You don't ask questions. You know better than that. You try to rest before the mission, but your brain won't let you. The forest has a different sound tonight. No insects, no wind, just the low crackle of fires and the occasional cough. You lie on your back, staring at the canvas of your tent, muscles tense, heart thumping. Jesse is next to you, flipping a coin over and over in the dark. Levi hums something tuneless, barely above a whisper. Midnight comes and you move out, 5 of you, ducking low, sticking to the trees. No torches, no talking, just moonlight and the wet crunch of leaves underfoot. You head northeast toward the ridgeline where the scouts had last seen movement. The forest here feels older, heavier. Every tree leans just a little too far, every shadow seems to follow you. You keep your musket ready, every sense tuned like a wire pulled tight. You reach the ridge and crouch low in the underbrush. Below, the valley is still. A few lanterns flicker in the distance, maybe another patrol, maybe enemy scouts. You watch, you wait, your thighs start to cramp, but you don't move. You hear something behind you, a crack of a branch. Everyone freezes. The silence stretches too long. Then, nothing. Just a deer stepping through the brush, ears twitching. You exhale. Jesse quietly mutters, "He followed us again." You smile, just a little, and the tension breaks for a second. You stay until nearly dawn, watching that stretch of woods like your life depends on it, which it very much does. You record what little you see in a notebook the officer gave you. 2 lanterns, distant movement, no engagement. It's nothing groundbreaking, but they'll probably call it valuable intel anyway. And here's the ongoing debate for this kind of work. Historians still argue about the real impact of small unit reconnaissance missions in the Civil War. Some say it was essential for battlefield awareness and manoeuvring. Others say most reports were outdated by the time they reached command. You're inclined to agree with the latter, but no one ever asks the scouts. You return to camp with aching legs and dried sweat crusting your skin. The sun's rising. Someone's boiling coffee over a fire that smells like someone lit a boot. You sit, take a cup, and sip without thinking. You've been up for nearly 24 hours now. The camp feels unchanged, but you don't. You feel older, quieter, like the woods took something from you last night. Maybe it's the silence. Maybe it's the watching. Maybe it's that you're starting to understand just how easy it is to disappear out there. You finish your coffee and start writing a letter home. This one begins with, "Still alive, for now." It takes a while before you stop hearing phantom footsteps in the trees. Even though your reconnaissance patrol ended without bloodshed, the feeling lingers, like someone's still out there, watching from just beyond the tree line. You're back in camp now, among the ragged, half-sick souls you've come to know like brothers. But that doesn't mean you feel safe, not really. You haven't felt safe since the day you opened that draft letter, and you suspect you won't feel it again until your bones are in the ground or the war is over. Whichever comes first. The camp is restless today, not just from nerves, but confusion. Mixed messages are coming down the chain of command. Something about a troop movement, maybe a planned offensive, maybe a redeployment. No one really knows. The officers don't share much, and even if they did, half the time they're guessing. The result is that you and your fellow soldiers spend the morning standing around in formation only to be dismissed, then called back 30 minutes later. By noon your boots are caked in dry mud, your shoulders ache from holding your musket at the ready, and your patience has been reduced to a threadbare string. Then the worst happens. Someone panics. It starts as a shadow in the woods, just a flicker, maybe a bird, maybe nothing. But one of the newer recruits, barely old enough to shave, sees it and fires. A single musket shot, sharp and echoing, cracks across camp like a whip. You freeze. Everyone does. Then chaos explodes. Soldiers dive for cover. Officers shout over each other. Someone starts screaming about an ambush. Muskets go off in random directions. You grab your weapon and drop behind a supply crate, heart jackhammering, trying to figure out what's actually happening. Through the smoke you see two men aiming at each other from opposite sides of the same tent, both too panicked to realise they are on the same side. And then someone goes down. You don't see who fires, but you hear the sound, a wet, meaty slap, and see the body collapse. It's one of the scouts from your patrol. He's hit in the chest, bleeding fast. Jesse and Levi reach him at the same time. Levi screams for a medic. You just sit there for a second, frozen, trying to will your heart to slow down. This isn't a battle. This is a mistake. Here's your historical fact for tonight. Friendly fire was a regular occurrence in Civil War battles. With black powder smoke filling the field, poor communication and inexperienced troops, it was tragically common for men to be shot by their own side. In the Battle of Chancellorsville, Confederate General Stonewall Jackson was famously shot by his own troops during a nighttime maneuver. He later died from complications. Even legends weren't safe from the fog of war. The camp slowly quiets. The officers get control, guns are lowered. You emerge from behind the crate, feeling a mix of nausea and disbelief. The scout is still alive, barely. But you can tell from the look on the medic's face, it's not going to be a good ending. He's not the first man you've watched die in front of you, but this one hits different. You patrolled beside him, ate beside him. You shared a laugh about bad boots just 2 days ago. Now he's gone over something that wasn't even real. This brings us to tonight's quirky, morbid fact. Civil War soldiers sometimes wore scraps of paper pinned to their uniforms with their names written on them. Not for vanity, so they could be identified after a battle if they were blown apart or left unrecognisable. Dog tags weren't issued, so soldiers made their own. You think about that as you fish through your pack for a scrap of paper. You tear it into a rough rectangle, write your name, and pin it to your coat with a bent nail, just in case. After the incident, you're assigned to repair the outer perimeter of the camp, a flimsy series of sharpened sticks jammed into the ground and loosely tied with rope. It wouldn't stop a determined goat, let alone enemy troops, but it's symbolic. Looks like you're holding position. You and Levi work in silence. Jesse joins later, still shaken. No one talks about the scout. No one has to. By late afternoon, a new rumour has taken hold. You're being relocated. No one knows where or why, only that orders are coming from high up. And you'll be moving out at first light. That puts everyone in motion. Gear gets packed, blankets rolled, Extra powder and shot distributed. You check your boots for the 5th time. They're falling apart. Again. You wrap the left one in more cloth and pray it lasts another mile. Now for your scholarly debate of the night. Some historians argue that Civil War units suffered more from internal confusion and command breakdowns than from actual enemy engagement. The fog of war wasn't just smoke and adrenaline, it was logistical chaos, unclear orders, and too many men trying to lead at once. Others say that the decentralized chaos bred resilience. Soldiers learned to adapt, take initiative, survive without always waiting for someone to shout an order. You've seen both, in the same day, sometimes in the same hour. Supper comes and goes, thin stew and burnt biscuits, nobody complains. Everyone's too focused on the move ahead. That's the thing about marching. Even though it's brutal, painful, exhausting, it gives you purpose. It's forward motion. Anything's better than sitting in camp waiting for more disease, more bad coffee, or more accidental gunfire. You're on night guard again, this time at the south side of camp. The forest is quieter tonight, like it knows something is coming and doesn't want to get in the way. You stand with your back to a mossy tree, musket slung across your chest, listening. There's a breeze, cool and steady. For a second it almost feels peaceful. You try to hang on to that. And then, movement. You raise your musket instantly. A figure steps out from the woods. Slow, deliberate, hands raised. "Don't shoot," he whispers. You hold your fire. 2 more shapes emerge behind him, also unarmed. Defectors. Confederate deserters, young, scared, dirty as sin. One has a bandage across his face. They look more like lost children than enemies. You call for your officer, and the protocol kicks in. You're told to guard them until dawn. You watch them huddle by the fire, too exhausted to even beg for food. One mutters something about tired of starving. Another stares into the flames, not blinking. You wonder how many more men like them are out there, hiding in the brush, trying to decide whether to run, surrender, or die. Before dawn, the officer asks for volunteers to escort the prisoners when the regiment moves out. You consider raising your hand, then you don't. You're too tired, too sore, too filled with a nameless weight you can't quite describe. Let someone else carry them. You're carrying enough already. The morning begins with a fog so thick it swallows everything. Trees blur into shadowy columns, campfires hiss and vanish into grey, and men move like ghosts, silent and sluggish. Your entire world feels wrapped in a wet wool blanket. You wake stiff, damp and cold, mouth tasting like copper. Throat raw from breathing in last night's smoke. The fog clings to your skin, soaking through your threadbare coat, and it's not even sunrise yet. The order to move comes just as you're pouring the last bit of bitter coffee into your tin cup. You don't even drink it. You dump it over your boots, hoping the heat will buy you a minute of feeling in your toes. It doesn't. You pack up your kit in silence, rolling the blanket with numb fingers, tucking away your cartridge box, cinching the straps of your knapsack like a man preparing for Judgment Day. The prisoners, those 3 Confederate deserters, are tied at the wrists and loaded into a wagon. They don't complain, they don't speak. They just stare straight ahead, like men who've already died once and are just waiting to do it again. Jesse helps secure them, you avoid their eyes. Marching in the fog is its own kind of torment. You can't see more than 10 feet ahead, and every step feels like walking through soup. Sounds get weird too. Footfalls echo in strange directions, voices bounce back from nowhere. You feel disoriented, like you're sleepwalking through a dream where everything's slightly off. The man in front of you disappears into the mist. You keep your hand on his back just to make sure you're still in a column. After 2 hours of that, you reach a field, and that's when the shouting starts. "Sniper!" The shot cracks like lightning. Everyone drops. You hit the dirt so hard you knock the wind out of yourself. Another shot from the left. Then nothing. The officers yell for calm, but it's too late. Everyone's scattered, flailing for cover, eyes wide with panic. Somewhere in the smoke and grass, a soldier screams, then another. You crawl to a tree stump and crouch low, musket in hand, trying to find the source. You see nothing. That's the thing about skirmishers. They shoot once, then vanish. Single sharpshooters, sometimes locals, sometimes trained scouts, slipping through the trees, taking out a man here, a man there, like ghosts with rifles. Here's your historical fact. The Civil War saw the rise of sharpshooting units like Burden's sharpshooters, elite marksmen trained to hit targets at long range using specialized rifles. Dressed in green to blend in with the trees, they were feared and hated. One Confederate general called them Green Devils. They could change the course of a battle with a handful of well-placed bullets. Today, one of those bullets found Levy. You don't even see him fall, you just hear Jesse's shout and then you're at his side, staring down at a wound that starts in his shoulder and disappears under his coat. There's so much blood. More than you thought a human body could hold. He's gasping, eyes wide, mouthing something you can't hear. You press your hands against the wound, but it keeps coming. Jesse grabs a piece of cloth and tries to bind it. The officer finally yells for the medics. It takes 5 minutes for them to arrive. By then, Levy's face is pale, lips blue. He's still breathing, but it's shallow. When they lift him onto the stretcher, he doesn't scream, he just winces, once, and closes his eyes. You and Jesse watch the medics disappear into the fog with your friend. Neither of you says a word. You fall back into formation, moving now with a numb sort of resolve. The sniper's gone. The field is clear. But everything feels different. You scan every hill, every tree, expecting another shot, another shadow. Trust is gone. Comfort is a memory. Eventually you arrive at your destination, a cluster of field tents and wagons hastily set up in a clearing. A forward hospital. The officers call it a rest point, but it looks more like a battlefield's waiting room. Groaning men lie in rows on the grass, some wrapped in bandages, some just wrapped in blankets. You smell it before you see it. Sweat, blood, rot and lie. The air is thick with it. Levi's stretcher is brought here. You follow him, ducking into a large tent where the smell hits like a slap. There are men streaming, some praying, some biting down on belts as surgeons work with saws and knives. There's no ether, no morphine. The supply's gone. They give them whiskey, and that's it. You stand against the wall, fists clenched, as the surgeon looks at Levi's wound and gives the kind of grim nod you never want to see. This one's going to lose the arm. You want to argue. You want to yell that it's just the shoulder, just a graze, but it's not. The surgeon explains that the ball shattered the bone. Infection's already setting in. Best chance is to cut it off and fast. And here's your unsettling historical fact. During the Civil War, amputation was the most common surgery performed. Roughly 3 out of 4 operations were amputations, often done without anesthesia, using dirty tools and performed within minutes. Quick, brutal and necessary, at least by their standards. Levi comes to just long enough to see you and Jesse standing there. He doesn't speak, he just nods once. Then the surgeon raises the saw and you can't watch. You walk outside, stomach twisting. Jesse stays. He always was the braver one. Now for a peculiar little historical gem. Some amputees kept their removed limbs, seriously. They'd bury them, mark the graves, even request their arms or legs be buried with them when the rest of their body finally caught up. Some wrote letters to their missing limbs. A strange kind of grief, but a real one. You sit outside the tent for what feels like hours, listening to the moans, the orders, the wet hacksaw rasping through bone. You try to tune it out, try to focus on the forest, the clouds, anything but what's happening inside. But it stays with you, the sound, the smell, or the look on Levi's face. Eventually Jesse emerges. His shirt is stained. He doesn't say a word. Just hands you a torn piece of cloth, Levi's sleeve. You hold it in your lap like it's something sacred. Maybe it is. Night falls. You're told you'll be moving again come morning. The war apparently doesn't stop for wounds. You lie down in the grass, blanket wrapped tight, musket at your side. Your stomach growls, but you can't eat. You close your eyes and try to picture Levi whole again. Back on the farm, sleeves rolled up, smiling. But the image slips away, replaced by a tent full of blood and a saw that never stops moving. The sun rises red as rust, and for once no one bothers to admire it. You're already moving, gear strapped, boots laced tight. Well, as tight as they'll allow with that busted sole. Pack heavy against your sore spine. Levi's still alive, last you heard. Still sedated, missing an arm, drifting in and out of lucidity under a stained sheet in the field hospital. Jesse visited him before dawn and said he opened one eye and tried to joke about needing help tying his shoes. The humour didn't land. Still, he's alive. For now, that's a victory. You're marching again, this time toward what the officers call a contingency position, which is army speak for, we don't really know what's happening, but assume it's bad. You pass through a patch of scorched forest, the trees blackened and skeletal, branches like broken fingers, everything smells like old smoke and rot. The silence is eerie. You glance up every so often, expecting musket fire, artillery, a burst of violence. but nothing comes. The column moves at a strange pace, brisk but cautious. Officers are jumpier than usual. You hear whispered reports of a Confederate push near the river, maybe a skirmish brewing to the west. Maybe not. It's all rumour, like usual, but the men believe it. You can feel it in the way everyone keeps their heads down and fingers twitch nervously near their triggers. At midday, you halt near a cluster of old fencing, abandoned farmland, half overgrown. Dispatch rider gallops up from the rear, dismounts, and hands a sealed letter to your company commander. You watch the officer's face as he reads it. He goes pale. Then he calls for volunteers. That's how you end up being selected, again. Not because you volunteered, you didn't, but because someone has to do it, and apparently your name is now synonymous with can survive being shot at. You, Jesse, and 2 others from another company are tasked with escorting prisoners, Confederate recently captured, back to a larger encampment several miles south. It's supposed to be an easy job. Walk, watch, deliver, return. The prisoners are quiet. There are 3 of them, all in varying states of disrepair. One's a teenage boy with hollow cheeks and a limp. Another is a middle-aged man who doesn't look like he's seen a bar of soap in weeks. The third is older, sun-wrinkled, missing 2 fingers, and oddly serene. None of them talk. You don't ask them questions. You just keep your musket in arm's reach and your eyes forward. Here's your historical fact. Prisoner exchange was a common practice early in the Civil War. Captured soldiers were often paroled and swapped for their counterparts. But by 1863, that system began breaking down, especially after the Union refused to continue exchanging Confederate soldiers while the South refused to recognize black Union troops as legitimate combatants. The result? More prisoners, longer captivity, worse conditions. As you walk, the prisoners start coughing. Not politely, wet, heaving, rib-shaking coughs. You and Jesse exchange a glance. Disease again. You know the signs. One of them slumps after just 2 miles. You let him rest, give him water. He doesn't thank you, just drinks, then stares ahead like he's not really there anymore. It's another 4 miles before the trouble begins. You reach a bend in the road, a thick thicket of trees on either side, dark and shadowed. It feels wrong immediately, the kind of wrong that makes your skin crawl and your stomach knot. Jesse mutters, "Ambush spot if I've ever seen one." You nod. He's not wrong. You round the bend, hand on your musket, eyes scanning, and then chaos. A shot rings out from the tree line, then another. You dive behind a fallen log, yelling for the prisoners to get down. 2 of them drop instantly. The third bolts into the brush. One of the other soldiers, Cartwright from the other company, is hit in the leg. He goes down hard, shouting in pain. Jesse fires into the trees. You do too, though you don't see who you're shooting at. Shapes move through the undergrowth, fast and low. Raiders, bushwhackers maybe. Not uniformed soldiers, just armed shadows. You manage to drive them off after a few frantic minutes of gunfire and yelling. The woods go quiet again, except for the moans of Cartwright and the laboured breathing of the prisoners. You don't chase the one who ran. You're not stupid. He's already gone. You patch Cartwright's leg with a strip of your own shirt. It's messy and crude, but it slows the bleeding. Jesse helps hoist him up. You make a stretcher from broken fence posts and a blanket. Now the march becomes a crawl. Here's a bizarre historical note. Sometimes captured enemy soldiers would fake illness or injury to escape while being transported. Others would run even while wounded. There's a recorded case of a Confederate prisoner who escaped Union custody, made it 80 miles on foot and rejoined his unit with an arrow still in his thigh. Soldiers are stubborn creatures. You finally reach the larger camp just after dusk. It's a sprawling mass of tents, smoke, noise and controlled chaos. You deliver the 2 remaining prisoners to the holding tent. Cartwright is rushed to the infirmary. A medic looks at your shirt-wrapped bandage and mutters, "Not bad for a soldier." You find a spot by the fire and collapse into it. Jesse tosses you a piece of cornbread someone gave him. It's hard as a rock, but you chew anyway. Hunger is stronger than texture. Across the fire, another squad is telling a story about a guy who tried to fake his death to avoid duty, hid under a blanket in the corpse wagon, and almost made it out before sneezing. Didn't end well for him. And now the debate of the day. Some historians argue that soldier loyalty during the Civil War was more about the unit, the messmates, the tent groups, the company, than about the cause. Others believe ideology held strong, even in the mud and horror. You've seen both. You fight for your boys. That's the truth. Everything else? That's for the speeches. You sleep in the dirt there at night. A borrowed blanket over your chest, your boots still on. Jesse sleeps next to you, snoring quietly. You dream of Levi, still whole, still laughing, and the sound of musket fire echoing in a foggy field. The camp you wake in is louder than usual. No bugle, just shouting. Not panic shouting, not orders, something else entirely. Excited voices, fast footsteps, the occasional cheer. For a second your mind tries to twist it into battle, but your body doesn't lurch into action like it usually would. You roll onto your side, blink against the morning sun, and slowly sit up. Joints cracking like firewood. Jesse's already awake, squatting by the fire with a mug of weak coffee and a curious look on his face. "What's going on?" you croak, your throat still coated with sleep and dirt. He shrugs and nods toward the row of tents near the edge of camp. Prisoners. Word is we're getting more. And sure enough, when you walk that way, boots dragging through dried mud and scattered straw, you see them. A line of captured Confederate soldiers, maybe 50 or more, escorted in by Union troops. Some are limping, some look like they haven't eaten in days. One has a bandage on his head, but it's not covering the wound, it's covering his eyes. Blinded, maybe. You can't tell. A few smile bitterly when they see you and the others standing there. One waves like it's all a joke. The makeshift prison is just a patch of fenced-in dirt surrounded by tents and guarded by a handful of bored-looking sentries. You watch them get herded inside like cattle. No fanfare, no questions, no dignity. They sit in the mud, arms wrapped around knees, eyes hollow. You stare at them, some stare back. One looks like Levi, and for a second, your gut twists like you're the one in the cage. Here's your historical fact for the day. As the war dragged on and prisoner exchanges collapsed, both the Union and Confederacy struggled to house and feed the rising tide of captured soldiers. The camps grew rapidly and were often thrown together with barely any planning. Conditions deteriorated fast. Starvation, exposure, disease. Many prisoners didn't live long enough to be exchanged, even if the system had still been in place. You're told to help run supplies to the camp, water mostly, some hardtack. A crate of beans that already smells questionable. As you approach, you hear the prisoners talking among themselves, low voices, accents sharp and slow, few jokes tossed between the men like they're trying to remind each other they're still human. One of them looks up as you pass and says, "You're treating us better than our own officers did." You don't respond, you don't know how to. You're not here to trade stories or play diplomat. You're here to keep them alive just long enough for someone higher up the ladder to decide what to do with them. That afternoon, you get assigned to help dig out a latrine trench behind the prison fence. Not glamorous, but nothing is. You work with Jesse and a few others, hacking at the dry earth with shovels that should have been replaced months ago. You sweat, curse, and occasionally glance over at the prisoners, some napping in the shade, others watching you like caged wolves. And here's a little-known footnote. In more than one camp, Union and Confederate prisoners ended up working together on chores under guard, digging ditches, fetching water, even building fences. The war blurred in these moments. There were jokes, swap tobacco, silent nods between men who didn't start this and sure as hell weren't going to finish it. After the latrine work, you head to the cook fire. Dinner tonight is a stew that smells passable. Beans, salt pork, something vaguely green that might be kale or might be moss. You sit cross-legged, bowl in your lap, and listen as someone tells a story about a mule that kicked an officer into a creek. You laugh along because it's either that or think about the fact that you're eating from the same spoon you used to scrape mud off your boot yesterday. Then, a voice from the prison pen, singing, starts with one prisoner, then two. A slow, mournful, choral tune. The kind of song that doesn't need words, just the weight of it hanging in the air. It's not a battle hymn, not a chant, just a melody with dirt on its boots. Everyone in camp pauses, even the officers. You don't recognize the tune, but it sounds like longing and loss and something old, older than the war, older than hate. Jesse mutters, sounds like they're singing to ghosts. And here's where we get into the debate. Some scholars argue that shared suffering humanized enemies in the war. Others say those moments were rare, the exception, not the rule. You've seen both, you've cursed men in grey, you've watched them die, but when they sing like this, when you hear the raw pain of it echoing across the firelight, it doesn't sound much different from your own. Night falls slow the way it does in southern summer. The air is thick, sticky and still. You lie on your blanket near the edge of camp, staring up at stars that don't blink. In the prison pen, someone's still humming that same tune. It fades in and out with the breeze. You think about Levi again. You haven't seen him since the field hospital. No news is either good or indifferent. Jesse says he'll ask around tomorrow. You nod, grateful, but say nothing. Your throat feels tight. Now for the fringe fact of the night. In a few rare cases, prisoners escaped by simply walking out. During moments of chaos, retreats, surprise attacks, a guard looking the wrong way, a man would vanish. There's a tale of a Confederate prisoner who swapped uniforms with a dead Union soldier and spent 2 days in the wrong lines before anyone noticed. War makes fools of order. You roll over, facing away from the fire, and pull your coat tighter around your shoulders. The world smells like sweat and wood smoke and a hint of rain on the wind. You close your eyes, hoping sleep will come fast. But your ears keep picking up the song even when it stops. You hum it, barely audible, until it's just a vibration in your throat. Then you sleep. You're shaken awake before dawn, boots already on, face crusted with dried sweat and dust. A corporal is standing over you with a face like sour milk and the charming phrase, "Time to earn your rations." You grumble something that might be a sentence, roll out of your blanket and immediately regret it. Your back cracks like a pifole, and your knee pops so loud Jesse winces just hearing it. He sits up next to you groggy, but already pulling on his coat. The air is thick with anticipation. There's no music in camp this morning, no idle chatter. Mad things happening, something big. You can feel it in the way men move faster, quieter. Orders are short and sharp. Your stomach twists as you gather your gear, not with fear exactly, but with that special kind of dread you only get when you know survival isn't guaranteed. The officers don't tell you much, as usual, just that you're being sent ahead. Skirmish line, they say, clear the road, but everyone knows that's code. What they mean is, walk into the unknown and get shot at first, so the rest of the army knows what they're dealing with. You're not surprised when they hand you a little map, hand-sketched and smeared with what looks like coffee, and tell you and Jesse you're to flank east with 2 others, then swing around a ridge and report anything suspicious, which in this context means everything. You move out quietly through a grove of pine, staying low, boots barely whispering over pine needles. The morning is misty, but not like the kind of fog you saw before. It's warmer now, and the sun's trying to punch through. The forest smells sharp and earthy. You like it. You hate that you like it. This is the kind of place you'd want to hike through, if it weren't a war zone. Your group splits at the ridge. You and Jesse veer off while the others head north. You move slow, careful, keeping low under the cover of branches, muskets ready. And then you spot it. A flash of grey and blue together. Confederate scouts, maybe. 2 of them. You duck behind a boulder, heart thudding. Jesse sees them too. You both freeze, watching. And that's when the plan comes. You're not supposed to engage, but they're close. Too close. You can hear them talking. One's laughing about something. You hear the words supply wagon and ambush, and suddenly, standing down isn't an option. You signal to Jesse, he nods. You both shift position, moving like shadows. You count to 3, then you stand, aim and fire. One of the men drops instantly, the other turns, fires back and misses. You sprint forward. Jesse reloads. The second man's running now, crashing through brush, but he's slowed by the terrain. You chase. He glances back, and that's all the time Jesse needs. Another shot rings out. He falls. You approach cautiously. The first man is dead, the ball having taken him through the neck. The second is still breathing, just barely. He's young, couldn't be older than 16. He's looking at you like he's surprised the sky is still blue. You kneel beside him, unsure what to do. Jesse catches up and stands behind you, silent. The boy says something, too soft to hear. You lean in. He repeats it. "Tell my mama I didn't run." You want to say something, anything, but the words don't come. His eyes roll back, and just like that, he's gone. You and Jesse bury them right there under the pines. It's not protocol, but it feels right. You use your bayonets to dig a shallow grave. You place a scrap of cloth on top, then you move on. Here's your historical fact for today. While formal burial parties existed more often than not, soldiers buried their enemies where they fell. Sometimes hastily, sometimes with care. It wasn't about honour, it was about practicality. Rot spread disease. And no one wanted to march past bloated corpses day after day. Here's your fringe detail. During the war, some soldiers carried tiny Bibles not just for faith, but as makeshift bullet stoppers. It rarely worked, but occasionally a New Testament in a chest pocket slowed a shot enough to save a life. That's the kind of miracle people started measuring in millimetres. You and Jesse returned to the main road by late afternoon, exhausted, uniforms smeared with dirt and ash. The officer takes your report with a grunt and a nod, doesn't even ask for details. You sit down by a wagon, let the sun bake your back while you wipe your hands clean on a strip of cloth that used to be part of someone's undershirt. You don't ask whose. Dinner is hardtack and cold beans again. You barely notice the taste. You eat, sip from your canteen and stare at the horizon, where smoke is starting to rise. Probably a skirmish to the south, maybe artillery practice. Either way, you know it means more marching, more dying, more graves under trees. That night the 2 other scouts don't return. Jesse asks around, no one's seen them. The officer shrugs. Could be anything, he says, and walks off. You lie awake under the stars, staring at nothing. You remember the young soldier's last words. You wonder if someone will say the same thing for you one day. You wonder if your mother would care. You wonder if she's even gotten your last letter. You roll onto your side, eyes burning. The forest is quiet again. Too quiet. They say returning to your unit after something traumatic should bring a sense of comfort. Familiar faces, familiar routines, even familiar mud. But that's not how it feels. When you and Jesse make it back after that skirmish in the pines, it feels like walking into a world that moved on without you. The tents are in different places, the fires are cold, there are fewer men. Some faces are new, wide-eyed replacements with fresh coats and clean boots, and others are just gone. No one welcomes you back, no one really looks up. The survivors nod like you just stepped out to fetch firewood, not walked the edge of death for 2 days. You drop your gear, sit on your old bedroll, still damp, and stare into the ashes of a long-dead fear. Home sweet home. The medic finds you later and gives you an update on Levi. He survived the surgery. Barely, lost a lot of blood, infection set in anyway. But he's still hanging on somewhere in a field hospital behind the lines. The medic offers no promises, just a tired shrug. That's the war's favourite gesture, you've noticed. Shrug and move on. Later that day, the sergeant rounds everyone up. Another speech, another set of orders, another reason to look busy, but this time there's something different in his voice. A weight you haven't heard before. You listen closely and catch it. Attrition. That's the word he uses. Our unit's down to half strength, he says, not looking up from the paper in his hand. Reinforcements delayed. Command's reassessing deployment. That's army language for we're in trouble and no one's coming to help. Here's your historical fact for this lovely sun-baked day. Most Civil War regiments began with about 1,000 men. By the time they reached their 2nd or 3rd year, that number often dropped below 300 due to casualties, disease and desertion. Some fought major battles with less than a third of their original strength, yet somehow they kept getting orders to hold the line. You look around at your fellow soldiers. Jesse, worn but steady. The new recruits, kids mostly. One's writing a letter, tongue sticking out in concentration like he's doing homework. Another is trying to make a fire with wet wood, muttering curses with increasing creativity. None of them have seen real battle yet. Their coats still fit. You spend the afternoon reassembling the camp, shifting supply crates, digging fresh drainage trenches, re-roping tents. It's busy work, but there's comfort in repetition. One motion at a time, one shovel of dirt, one knot tied. At least your hands are occupied. Your mind is harder to distract. That night you find a quiet spot near the edge of camp. You sit alone, staring up at the moon. It's full. Soft light spills across the trees, turning the battlefield into something almost peaceful. You hate it. It shouldn't be this pretty. Not after what you saw out there in the pines. Not with Levi halfway between life and death. Not with those 2 scouts still missing. A shadow moves beside you. It's Jesse. He doesn't say anything, just sits down next to you and passes over a small bottle of something that smells like paint thinner and rage. You take a sip anyway. It burns your throat and settles in your chest like a punch. Then he pulls something from his coat. A harmonica. You still remember that hymn Levi used to hum? He asks. You nod. He starts playing it. Slow, unsure. A little off-key, but it's there. The melody you've heard 100 times by the fire, in the dark, while waiting for death. You close your eyes and let it wash over you. The notes are shaky, but they hold something real. Memory, pain, survival. Now for your weird little footnote. There's at least one documented case of a harmonica stopping a bullet. A Union soldier carried it in his chest pocket. Ball hit it dead center. Flattened both the harmonica and the bullet. Saved the man's life. Gave him a wheeze in his chest that never went away, but he lived. The next morning, the lieutenant hands out fresh cartridges and dry rations, two things that always mean bad news. You're told to be ready to move at a moment's notice. "Recon again," he mutters, almost apologetically. You glance at Jesse. No words are needed. You've been here before. And now for the scholarly debate of the day. Should worn-out units like yours have been rotated out more frequently? Some argue that continuous deployment hardened men into survivors. Others say it destroyed them from the inside out, leaving walking corpses in uniform. Looking around, you can't help but think maybe both. The replacements keep to themselves mostly. One of them, Wallace, you think, asks you quietly what it's really like. You pause, consider lying, then say, "Loud, fast, confusing. You're usually hungry, and if you don't die, it's by accident." He laughs, but it doesn't reach his eyes. That night, another courier arrives. He has news. Your company's being reassigned to a frontline trench outside of a key railway junction. It's supposed to be a strategic position. That's code for vital and probably already under fire. You and Jesse spend the evening preparing, cleaning your rifles, tightening straps, whispering through worst-case scenarios without admitting that's what you're doing. Before turning in, you do something you haven't done since this all started. You write a will. Just a few lines scrawled on the back of a crumpled envelope. "Bury me with my boots on. If Levi makes it, give him my harmonica." You fold it twice, tuck it into your shirt, and lie down beside your musket. Sleep doesn't come. It never really does anymore. Instead, you lie awake, listening to the wind, to the insects, to the faint rustling of trees. You count your breaths. You imagine what it might feel like to stop counting them. But for now, you're still here. You've never liked trenches, but this one takes the prize. It's less a trench and more a muddy suggestion of one, dug hastily into a slope filled ankle-deep with brown water and barely wide enough for two men to pass side by side. The dirt walls crumble when touched. There are rats the size of raccoons staring at you like you're trespassing in their home. And the smell, good God, the smell is the worst part. You can't tell if it's rotting food, blood, mildew, or the 100 other things that have seeped into the ground over the past weeks. Probably all of it. Probably more. You arrive with your unit in the grey hush before dawn. The railway junction is a few hundred yards ahead, held by a Union regiment dug in behind sandbags and a couple of battered cannons. They're the only reason the line hasn't been overrun already. Your job is to hold the right flank, the low ground, because of course they're sending you to the part most likely to collapse first. You and Jesse slide into the trench alongside the few soldiers already there. They barely glance up. They look like they've been here forever. Mud-streaked, dead-eyed, reeking of sweat and resignation. An old sergeant greets you with a nod. "Watch the ridge," he says, jerking a thumb to the east. "That's where they come from, always in the morning, never knock first." You nod. Jesse sighs. You get into position. Here's your historical fact to chew on while you wait in the muck. Trench warfare didn't start in World War I. Civil War soldiers dug in deep during sieges and prolonged standoffs, most famously at Petersburg, where both Union and Confederate forces lived like moles for nearly 10 months. Life in those trenches was a mix of mud, disease, sniper fire, and despair. Your first shot of the day is blind. You hear a crack from the ridge and fire back instinctively, not even aiming. Smoke coils up, choking sweet and sulphurous. Jesse fires next to you, then ducks low as a bullet slaps the dirt wall above his head. "Friendly reminder," he mutters. "These walls ain't bulletproof." You both laugh. You have to. Is the only weapon you have left that doesn't misfire. And speaking of weapons, yours does misfire. Right after your third shot, you go through the motions, load, aim, pull the trigger, click, nothing. You stare down at it like it just insulted your mother. Jesse glances over. "Oh no. Old Betsy giving you trouble?" You don't answer. You just yank back the hammer, recheck the primer, try again. Still nothing. You curse and pull out your knife. The only thing worse than a broken musket is having no weapon at all. You could throw it, maybe, at close range. Hope the insult causes mortal offence. Here's your quirky footnote for the day. During the war, muskets and rifles frequently misfired due to damp powder, fouled barrels, or faulty percussion caps. One soldier reportedly carried a rock in his pocket as a backup weapon, which he once used to knock out a Confederate scout. It worked. Messy but effective. You clean the barrel with a patch and prayer, it fires the next time. but the delay has already rattled you. You spend the rest of the morning double-checking every load, every cap, every motion. War has made you suspicious of everything, including your own gear. The hours stretch long, skirmishers dart through the trees beyond the ridge, testing your line. No full assault yet, just pot shots and probes. The kind of fighting designed to wear you down rather than wipe you out. It works. By midday your ears are ringing, your arms are sore, and your stomach's forgotten what full feels like. The trench turns into a swamp as rain rolls in. Not a storm, just that steady, endless drizzle that seeps into your clothes and soul. The bottom of the trench becomes a slurry of muck and human waste. You stand in it anyway, because there's nowhere else to go. You can't sit, you can't leave, you can't even dig deeper, because the water level's too high. One of the new recruits slips and falls flat on his back. Doesn't even swear, just lies there, eyes open, blinking at the sky. You and Jesse help him up. He says, "I think I broke my spine." He didn't. He just wishes he had. A broken back would mean a ticket out. Here's the debate of the day. Did trench warfare actually help preserve lives, or just prolong suffering? Some argue that trenches gave soldiers cover and reduced outright slaughter. Others say they turned battles into grinding slogs, dragging out the inevitable. When you're waist-deep in mud with rats chewing your rations, you start to lean toward the latter. Late in the day, the enemy test your line again, this time harder. A small group breaks from the trees and charges the ridge, maybe thinking your position's weak. You fire, Jesse fires, 2 others fire, 1 attacker drops, the others dive for cover, but they're in the open. You pick them off 1 at a time. It's over in seconds, but your hands keep shaking for minutes after. One of the new recruits is hit. Not bad, just a graze on the shoulder. He screams like he's dying though. You get it. It's his first time bleeding in uniform. Jesse helps bind the wound while you keep watch. The enemy doesn't come back. Night falls. The trench grows colder. You light a tiny fire in a coffee tin, more for the illusion of warmth than actual heat. Jesse tries to dry his socks over it. They steam but stay wet. Your own feet are numb, your toes likely raw. You lost feeling in them halfway through the afternoon. You're not sure you want it back. Dinner is a handful of stale crackers and water that tastes like tin and moss. You chew slowly, head resting on the stock of your musket. You hear whispers from the other side of the trench, someone praying, someone quietly crying. A few feet away, a soldier scribbles a letter in the dark, lit by a match. You catch 2 words, "Forgive me." You don't ask, you don't want to know. Now for one last little detail before sleep. Some Civil War soldiers in trenches developed what we'd now call PTSD, though back then it had no name. Some called it soldier's heart, others just called it weakness. But you know it well. It's the twitch in your hands, the dreamless sleep, the way you flinch at the sound of thunder. It's the fact that even now you're listening for footsteps in the dark. You pull your coat tighter, curl against the trench wall and try to sleep sitting up, musket across your lap, finger near the trigger, just in case. You wake to silence so complete it feels wrong. No bugle, no birds, no clanking tin cups or morning cursing from the sergeant. Just a thick, unnatural quiet hanging over the trench like a damp blanket. You open your eyes slowly. Jesse's already awake beside you, blinking up at the pale dawn sky with a look that says he hears it too. That nothingness. It's not peace, it's a warning. You sit up, muscles protesting, back stiff from sleeping in a half hunch against a mud wall. The fire tin is cold, your breath fogs in the chill. Around you, others are stirring with the same wary energy. Everyone's too tired to say it out loud, but it's obvious. The enemy's not shooting because they're planning something. Then the order comes down the trench like a slow wave. Hold position. No fire unless fired upon. You love those orders. They usually come right before something explodes. You spend the morning listening. Every creak of a branch makes your heart skip. Every whisper of wind sounds like boots in the brush. You lean against the wall of the trench, eyes fixed on the tree line ahead, fingers twitching near the trigger. The longer the quiet stretches, the louder your thoughts become. You think about Levi, about the boy in grey who asked you to tell his mother he didn't run. You think about the harmonica in your pocket, still carrying Jesse's off-key memory of the song. Noon passes with no action, but the air keeps tightening, like a rope being pulled around your ribs. You eat a cold biscuit just to stop your hands from shaking. Jesse mutters, "I don't like this." You nod. No one does. Then, just after mid-afternoon, something shifts. A ripple of movement on the ridge. You squint, muscles tense. A flag flutters above the tree line, grey with a tattered edge. Then you see them, Confederates, dozens of them, not charging but walking openly, boldly, rifles lowered. You almost think it's a surrender. You stand, blink, check again. No white flag, just a strange deliberate advance. And then a shout from behind you. Someone sees what you didn't. More of them, circling wide from the left, rifles raised. It's a feint. Everything erupts at once. Bullets crack through the trench wall. Dirt and splinters fly. Someone screams. Jesse grabs your arm and pulls you down as your own musket jumps in your grip, the shot going wild. Smoke rolls in fast, black powder, thick and acrid, turning the world to shadows and flashes of light. You load again, fumble with the cap, fire blind over the wall. The musket kicks hard into your shoulder. You duck, reload, fire again, shapes blur at the edge of your vision, grey and blue mixed, all of it chaos. Here's your historical fact. The fog of battle wasn't just a metaphor. Black powder rifles created massive clouds of smoke that made visibility nearly impossible after the first volley. Entire engagements devolved into blind shooting, close combat and confusion. Commanders lost control. Soldiers relied on instinct, on the man next to them, or sometimes on nothing at all. A Confederate soldier drops into the trench 10 feet from you. You don't think, you swing your musket like a club, the butt connecting with a sickening crack. He collapses. You stare for a moment, frozen, then keep moving. Jesse fires again and shouts for you to follow. You duck through the trench, leap over a fallen comrade, nearly trip on a discarded bayonet. The line is breaking. You feel it in your bones. Some men are fighting, some are running. You grab a cartridge from your pouch, hands slick with sweat. Try to load. A shot rings out. Dirt explodes at your feet. You press forward, not thinking, just breathing. One breath. One step, one shot. That's all there is. Then comes the countercharge. The captain, somehow still standing, shouts for the men to rally. You hear your own voice yelling back, almost without meaning to. You and Jesse and a handful of others climb out of the trench and rush forward, bayonets fixed, into the smoke. It's madness. You stab, swing, trip, fall, rise again. You don't know who you hit. You don't know if they die. The world is colour and noise and mud. You lose your cap. You lose your footing. You nearly lose your grip on the musket. And then, it's over. Not with a bang, not even with a retreat. Just a slow dragging end as the enemy pulls back, the smoke thins, and the groans of the wounded replace the gunfire. You drop to your knees, chest heaving, heart threatening to quit. Your shirt is torn, your coat stained with blood you're not even sure is yours. Jesse finds you, limping but whole. You both sit on the edge of the trench, covered in grime, staring at what's left, bodies everywhere, both sides, some piled together, some crumpled alone. One man still holds his rifle like he's aiming, but he's clearly dead. Eyes open, unmoving, face caked in dirt. And now for today's weird little postscript. After heavy engagements, soldiers often describe the battlefield as eerily beautiful. Flowers still bloomed. Birds returned. The silence was surreal, almost sacred. But the contrast made it worse, not better. Like the world didn't care what had just happened. You help carry the wounded back to camp. There are too many, not enough stretchers. Some are dragged on tarps. Some walk on their own, clutching wounds. One man sings the same line of a hymn over and over, till someone finally tells him to stop. As night falls, the survivors gather by the dim orange glow of a lantern. Someone says the word victory. No one believes it. You lost too many. The trench still reeks. The junction still isn't secure. All you did today was keep from dying. Barely. That's not winning. That's just not losing. Now for the debate. How much of war's outcome is strategy, and how much is just who breaks first? Some say discipline and training win battles. Others say it's dumb luck. You're starting to think it's mostly stubbornness, refusing to fall before the other guy does. You sleep in your coat, cradling your musket, boots still on. You dream of the charge. But in your dream, the trench never ends. You just keep climbing out of it again and again, and the smoke never clears. The sun doesn't rise the next morning, it creeps. It leaks through the treetops like it's afraid to disturb the dead. You open your eyes to the sound of boots crunching softly on damp earth, and the quiet shuffle of someone trying not to wake those who made it through the night. Jesse sits beside you, already lacing his boots, face half-shadowed in the dim light. He doesn't say good morning. No one does anymore. Mornings just mean you're not dead yet, that's all. The trench stinks worse than ever. You feel it before you smell it. A rot in the air, thick and sticky. It clings to your clothes and your tongue. Someone says it's because they haven't had time to bury the bodies yet. Others say the ground's too soaked and the graves keep filling with water, so the dead stay piled near the edge, draped with old coats or blankets if they're lucky. One has nothing but a handful of pine needles tossed across his face, like some sad excuse for decency. There's no fighting today. Not yet. Just the kind of stillness that makes your skin crawl. The officers say the enemy pulled back again, probably regrouping. That means you're stuck in the trench, waiting, guarding, watching. You pull your scarf up over your nose to block the worst of the smell and take your post on the north wall, staring out across the battered field like a scarecrow. Guard duty is supposed to be easy. Stay alert. Watch. Don't fall asleep. But easy's not the word you'd use. Not when the line between real and imagined gets so blurry. Your eyes play tricks on you now. Trees look like people. Birds in the brush sound like boots. The wind whistles low through the broken branches and sounds almost like whispering. You grip your musket tighter. Here's your historical fact for the night shift. Night watch was one of the most dreaded duties in Civil War camps. Fatigue, fear and hallucination were common. Falling asleep on duty could mean death. Not just for you, but for everyone. It was technically a hanging offence, though more often soldiers were tied to posts in the sun as punishment, unless they were made an example. Which brings us to your odd historical tidbit. There's at least one recorded case of a guard so terrified of being executed for sleeping that he voluntarily stood watch for 3 days straight. By the time his captain found him, he'd collapsed in the mud, face down, rifle still in hand. He lived, but barely. And he was never posted at night again. You don't fall asleep, you wouldn't dare, but your mind drifts. And when the sun finally dips behind the ridge, everything sharpens. Shadows stretch long. The colours drain from the world and the night creeps in like smoke from a slow fire. You eat a cold meal, hardtack and a strip of jerked meat you think might be raccoon, and settle in for your turn at midnight watch. The fire is low. The camp is hushed. Jesse dozes nearby, his hat pulled over his face, and a few soldiers whisper quietly, passing a bottle of something stronger than coffee between them. Somewhere out beyond the trench, a coyote howls. You don't know what time it is anymore, only that your shift started after second meal and your toes are already numb from the cold. Your post is at the far end of the trench tonight, down by the waterline where the ground turns soft and every footstep makes a squelch. You stand just outside the main path, hidden beneath the shadow of a tree that looks like it's been half exploded by artillery. The bark is black and split open like a wound. The darkness plays tricks with sound. You hear distant movement, leaves rustling, a low scrape, probably an animal. You tell yourself that 3 times, then you see it. A figure moving at the tree line, slow, crouched. Then another. You don't breathe, you just watch. They move with practiced caution, low to the ground using the terrain. They're not Union, and they're not foraging deer. These are scouts, Confederates. You raise your musket but don't fire. Not yet. You follow protocol, watch first, confirm, then report. You wait until they vanish behind a cluster of brush, then slip back into the trench and sprint to the lieutenant's post. You tell him what you saw. He stares for a beat, eyes heavy with sleep, then nods. Tell the captain, we wake the line in 10. By the time you return to your post, the others are stirring. Jesse meets you at the corner of the trench, rubbing his eyes. You sure it was them, he asks. Positive, you say. And that's when the first shot rings out. It's not near you. It comes from the southern end, followed by another, and then a third. The line erupts in shouts. Lanterns flare. Men grab their weapons. It's not an attack, but a probe, another test. Maybe even a distraction for the scouts you spotted. You duck low, musket ready, watching the woods for movement. Here's the scholarly debate for your shift. Did these small nighttime engagements matter? Were they part of a broader strategy, or just nervous men firing into the dark? Some historians say they kept enemy pressure high. Others claim they were pointless and wasteful, nothing but men too scared to sleep and too proud to admit it. Tonight, it feels like both. Eventually, the shots stop. The woods go quiet. But now everyone's awake, on edge, backs pressed to the trench walls. You and Jesse are told to stay on post. The officers are convinced the scouts are still out there. You keep your eyes forward. You watch every branch, every gust of wind, and then you see it again. Just a flicker, grey cloth vanishing behind a tree, but the time you don't report it. You fire, your musket cracks like a whip, smoke coils from the barrel. Jesse jerks toward you, startled. You see something? He asks. You nod. The line doesn't fully relax for another hour. By then, the stars are bright and sharp above you, cold light pricking through black sky. You're exhausted, half mad with it, but still alert. Your body's learned a new kind of survival, one where rest is dangerous and movement means life. When you're finally relieved from post, you stagger to the back of the trench and collapse into your coat. You don't take off your boots, you barely loosen your belt. You just close your eyes and will yourself to sleep. And the last thing you remember before the dreamless dark swallows you is the sound of wind in the trees, and the very quiet certainty that someone is still out there, watching. Dawn hits like an insult, brilliant and gold, bleeding through the trees and glinting off rifle barrels and wet mud. You blink awake to the sounds of camp stirring, clinking tin, murmured curses, the rhythmic rasp of someone sharpening a bayonet like he's trying to saw his own anger down to something manageable. Your muscles ache in that dull, permanent way now. Not soreness, not injury, just a steady protest from a body that's lived too long in fear and cold and damp. You sit up, stretch, and realise your right boot is frozen in place, literally. The mud hardened overnight. You pry it loose with the handle of your knife. There's still no word from command, just vague orders to maintain readiness and conserve powder. That last part always makes you nervous. If they're telling you to ration ammunition, it means they expect a need for it. And soon. Jesse offers you coffee, weak and grainy, but warm. You sip it while squatting near the trench's edge, watching the forest through puffy eyes and fogged breath. It's quiet, but not in a good way. Today's focus isn't fighting, it's surviving. The weather's shifted hard, the sky is heavy, the wind cruel. A front has rolled in from the west, dragging icy air with it. No snow yet, but the cold is settling in like an unwelcome guest, poking its fingers through every seam in your coat, every hole in your boots. The firewood's wet. The blankets are damp. You've run out of dry socks. You feel it in your bones. Winter is coming hard and it won't care what side you're on. Here's your historical fact for today. Winter camp life during the Civil War was notoriously brutal. Though major battles slowed during the cold months, death didn't. Soldiers froze to death in their sleep. Frostbite claimed fingers, toes, ears. Clothing was rarely adequate, and blankets were shared. Sometimes firewood was so scarce, men burned fence posts or even the handles of their own tools. Survival became its own kind of war. You're sent to help dig a new latrine trench again because the last one froze and backed up. You spend an hour with a busted shovel and half-frozen fingers, hacking at the icy ground while your breath fogs the air in front of you. It's grim work. Disgusting. Necessary. Jesse handles it better than you, humming some old hymn while he digs. You just swear softly and keep swinging. One of the replacements vomits from the smell. No one mocks him. Everyone's been there. You try to dry your socks over the fire later, but they catch. Burnt wool stinks worse than corpses. You throw them into the mud and watch them smoulder. Jesse hands you a spare pair, mismatched, riddled with holes, but better than nothing. Don't say I never gave you anything, he mutters. You nod. It's a gift that might save your toes. Midday brings the supply wagon, or, more accurately, what's left of it. 1 horse, 1 driver, and a tarp barely clinging to the frame. Half the crates are already cracked open. Inside, a few tins of beans, 1 mouldy sack of flour, a crate of bullets so old they might explode backward. But the real prize? Coffee, a whole pound of it, sealed in wax paper and still dry. The quartermaster nearly weeps. Now for a strange but true tidbit. Coffee was so treasured during the Civil War that soldiers often traded tobacco, buttons, or even spare cartridges for just a spoonful. Union soldiers, in particular, were obsessed. Some claimed it helped ward off dysentery. Others just needed something hot to keep their sanity in the cold. Confederate troops, who rarely had it, resorted to roasting acorns, chicory, or even peanuts as a substitute. Back in the trench, the tension hasn't gone anywhere. Word spreads that another regiment up the road froze in place, caught mid-March by a freak ice storm. A few men died standing up, their hands still clutching the reins of horses that collapsed beneath them. You don't know if it's true, but it feels true. And that's enough. As the sun dips low and the wind starts howling, the rumours start again. Talk of movement in the trees. Talk of cavalry behind the ridge. A few guys are convinced they saw lanterns in the forest last night. Just flickers, moving slow. Could be scouts, could be ghosts, could be the cold playing tricks on already battered minds. The lieutenant orders double watch overnight. You draw the second shift from 2 to 4 in the morning, what the older guys call the death hours. The cold is deepest then, the dark is heaviest. The fire dies, the mind starts unravelling. So you prepare. You wrap rags around your hands, stuff cloth into your boots. Pack your coat with straw for insulation. You make coffee and drink it black even though your stomach screams for real food. Jessie offers you a drag from a homemade cigar that smells like hay and gunpowder. You take it. You don't even smoke. But tonight, anything that burns is a blessing. Now for the debate of the day. Historians still argue over which was worse, summer heat or winter cold. Some claim the flies, rot and disease of July were hell. Others insist that frostbite, starvation and slow, bone-deep cold did more to break men. You're living the cold side now, and your vote's been cast with chattering teeth. You try to sleep before your shift, but can't. The ground's too hard, and the wind keeps slipping through the trench like a knife. Instead, you stare up at the stars and remember something your grandfather once said. Cold don't care who you are, it just wants to eat. You didn't get it as a kid. Now you do. Your shift starts on time. The trench is mostly quiet. You and another soldier, Wells from Ohio, pace opposite ends, muskets slung low, breath steaming. Every sound is magnified. The rustle of a squirrel, the groan of a frost-bloated tree, and the clink of your own belt buckle. You keep glancing at the ridge, where the tree line blurs into fog. You imagine movement even when there's none. Here's the fringe fact for the long hours. Some men carved notches into their rifle stocks, not for kills but for nights survived. Not battles won, just nights endured. Each mark a testament not to valour, but to the simple brutal fact of still being here. You run your thumb over your musket and wonder if it's time to start counting. Your shift ends without incident. No scouts, no cavalry. Just 4 hours of cold and quiet and the creeping certainty that tomorrow will be worse. You crawl back into your coat, curl up in the muck and stare into the dark until sleep finds you. Not peace, not warmth, just sleep. You're not sure what wakes you first, the shouts, the rumble of cannon fire, or the sheer feeling in your bones that something has shifted. It's still dark when you open your eyes, but the world's no longer quiet. There's urgency in the air, in the voices barking orders, in the way boots are pounding down the trench line, in the way Jessie shakes your shoulder without saying a word. You're up before you know it, grabbing your musket and cinching your belt like your body knew this moment was coming, even if your mind hadn't caught up. The sky is just starting to bleed colour, but the trees to the east are already glowing. First amber, then gold, then fire. It takes you a moment to realise it's not sunlight at all. It's actual fire. Smoke rises in thick coils above the ridge, and with it, the first blast of real cannon fire you've heard in days. The kind that rattles your teeth and punches through your gut like it's reminding you your organs are still there. The lieutenant scrambles down the trench yelling for everyone to form up. "Full engagement," he shouts. "They're pushing for the junction. This is it." He doesn't say what this is, last stand, breaking point, suicide mission. Doesn't matter. You know. Here's your historical fact of the morning. During the last year of the Civil War, both sides launched increasingly desperate offensives in a final effort to tip the scales. These weren't elegant, clean manoeuvres. They were grinding, brute force clashes, often fought in the mud through fire under constant artillery. The goal wasn't territory, it was collapse. To break the other side before you broke first. You rush with Jessie and the others to reinforce the front line. There's no time for strategy. You're handed fresh ammunition in a sack, 2 extra percussion caps, and pointed toward the rampart like that's supposed to be enough. You load your musket with shaking hands. Jessie double-checks his bayonet. The new kid, Wallace, throws up into the mud, wipes his mouth, and gets in line. The first wave hits just after sunrise. They come screaming out of the woods, grey coats blurred by smoke, bayonets glinting. There are so many. You don't think, you just fire. The recoil rocks your shoulder. You reload by instinct. Someone next to you doesn't. They fumble, drop the cartridge, get shot before they can try again. You shove another ball down the barrel, ramrod working like a piston, fire again. Jessie yells, "Left side's folding!" You glance and see it. Half your trench line sagging, too many bodies slumped along the wall, not enough men standing to hold it. You don't wait for orders. You grab Wallace and sprint that way, muskets held tight. You slide into the breach, take cover behind a mound of dirt that used to be part of a supply wagon, and start firing. This time it's closer. You see their faces, dirty, screaming, young. One stumbles through the smoke and levels his rifle at you, but Jesse's faster. He drops at the man with a shot to the chest. Another Confederate lunges over the trench wall and swings a bayonet like he's trying to cut through time itself. You block it with your musket, steel clanging off wood, then ram your shoulder into his gut. He falls. You stab once, twice, then you stop counting. Now for today's fringe fact. In the chaos of Civil War battles, hand-to-hand combat was more common than most people imagine. Bayonets, knives, even shovels were used when rifles were too slow to reload. Some soldiers sharpened the edges of their entrenching tools, knowing full well they'd end up fighting face-to-face in the filth. War wasn't neat. It was primal. The hours blur. The line bends but doesn't break. Cannon fire roars overhead, punching holes in the ground and ears alike. You taste blood in your mouth and don't know if it's yours. Jesse gets clipped in the thigh. He curses and ties it off with his belt, then keeps shooting. Wallace takes a ball to the shoulder but lives. You start to think you might live too, until the third wave hits. They come in stronger this time, more organised, more aggressive. You can see the officer leading them, sword raised, bellowing orders through the smoke. He looks like he hasn't slept in weeks, probably hasn't, probably doesn't care. You brace for another round, but then you hear it. The whistle of reinforcements. A horn from behind your line, then the rumble of boots. Union troops surge forward, fresh men, clean coats, shouting their lungs out as they rush the trench with you. It turns into a melee. No line, no order, just chaos. Men grappling in the dirt, bayonets flashing. Someone near you gets his head cracked with a rifle butt. Someone else swings wildly and hits his own man. You shoot at close range and feel the heat from the other man's breath before he falls. And then, finally, it ends. You don't even notice at first. You just stop hearing gunfire. You stop hearing anything, really. It's like the volume's been turned down on the whole world. You stand in the middle of the trench, musket lowered, smoke clearing, blood on your face, on your hands. The Confederates are retreating, limping, dragging each other away into the woods. A few are left behind, dead or dying. You sit down hard in the muck and let out a breath you didn't know you were holding. Jesse limps over and sits next to you. Neither of you speaks for a while. Now for your scholarly debate. Was the brutality of Civil War charges a failure of leadership or just the only tool commanders had left? Some argue these mass attacks were reckless, outdated tactics forced onto a modern battlefield. Others believe they were grim necessities, an all-or-nothing attempt to break the enemy's will. Either way, they cost everything. You help bury the dead that afternoon. There are too many to count. You dig with numb hands, use your bayonet when you can't find a shovel. Some of the bodies are mangled beyond recognition. Some look like they're sleeping. You find a letter in one man's pocket. You don't read it. You just tuck it back in and bury him with it. The sun sets red again. You sit with Jesse beside a low fire, silent. Too tired to eat, too wired to sleep. Wallace joins you, his arm in a sling, eyes wide and blank. You pass him the harmonica. He holds it but doesn't play. You lie back, staring at the dark sky. The stars are bright again, distant, indifferent. You whisper something to them, not sure what or why, and for the first time in a long while you sleep without dreaming. You wake up with dirt in your teeth and blood dried stiff across your collar. The fire's gone out. The sky is pale grey, clouds hanging low, like an old tarp pulled too tight. Jesse's gone from your side, but his coat's still there, a silent promise he hasn't gone far. You sit up slow, every muscle crying out like it's being evicted, and the first thing you notice, more than the cold, more than the stink, is the quiet. Not the heavy, ominous silence from before battle, but a soft hush, stillness, like the land itself is catching its breath. You stagger out of the trench and see the aftermath in full daylight. The bodies have mostly been moved, but the signs are everywhere. Churned mud, stained black, shattered rifles, hats lying like abandoned thoughts. A few men wander aimlessly, eyes vacant. Others kneel beside makeshift graves, heads bowed, not in prayer exactly, just in exhaustion. Jesse finds you near the water barrel, his limp worse today. He hands you a tin cup without speaking. The water's warm and tastes faintly of wood smoke, but it goes down easy. "Captain says we hold here for now," he mutters. "Railway junctions are all secure. For the moment." For the moment. That's the kind of phrase the officers use when they don't want to admit how fragile the win is. You lean against the trench wall drinking slowly, watching a pair of younger soldiers trying to scrape dried blood off a blanket. They're using bayonets like spatulas. One gags, the other keeps scraping. Here's your historical fact. Even after major battles were won, most Civil War soldiers didn't get to celebrate. There were no parades, no medals, no triumphant speeches, just more digging, more waiting, more death. Sometimes they didn't even know they'd won until days later, when the bodies stopped coming and the food started arriving again. Today's job? Clean up. Not glamorous, not heroic, just necessary. You help restack sandbags where the trench buckled. You haul splintered boards from what used to be a signal post. Jesse directs traffic at the edge of the ridge, helping redirect messengers and carts that keep getting stuck in the mud. The ground is a mess, slippery, pocked with craters soaked through. Every step feels like pulling your feet out of wet concrete. Mid-morning, word spreads of a small Confederate detachment surrendering a few miles south. They were out of food, out of ammunition, half frozen, their horses long since eaten or abandoned. A few of the prisoners are marched past your position, flanked by grim-faced Union guards. One of them, a kid barely old enough to shave, catches your eye and smiles weakly. You don't smile back. Now here's a fringe fact for your collection. During the later years of the war, some Confederates began surrendering in small numbers without even being asked. Entire squads would lay down arms and walk toward Union lines waving whatever cloth they had. But not out of cowardice, because they were starving. Their officers dead, their shoes gone. Sometimes a surrender was the last act of defiance they had left. Back in camp, you're handed a sheet of paper and told to write your name on a new muster list. Promotions are happening, reassignments too. The company's been gutted and needs rebuilding. You scrawl your name with a half-broken pencil, hand cramping from cold, and pause when you reach the section marked Status, Alive. That's all it asks for now. You're still listed as private, but Jesse's been bumped to corporal. He groans when he finds out. "Means I gotta start caring," he jokes. But you can see the pride behind his eyes. Even if he pretends not to, he deserves it. He's still standing. Afternoon brings warm rations, an actual stew with real meat. It smells like heaven and mystery. You eat every bite, grateful even as you wonder what kind of meat it was. A quartermaster with a black eye and no explanation says it's beef. No one believes him, but no one asks questions either. Hunger trumps curiosity. As you sit by the fire, finally full for the first time in weeks, Jesse pulls out the harmonica again. He plays a soft tune, something aimless and slow, a melody that drifts like smoke and doesn't care if it's remembered. Wallace hums along, still pale, his arm freshly bandaged but moving better today. Now for your scholarly debate. Did music actually keep soldiers sane, or did it just distract them long enough to delay the breakdown? Some argue that war songs and folk tunes helped build camaraderie, preserved culture, soothed the trauma. Others suggest it was just another coping mechanism, like letters or superstition, something to do while waiting to die. You sit by the fire, listening to Jesse's broken notes, and think maybe it doesn't matter which is true. The sun begins to dip again, and the officers tell you to expect movement soon. Not from the enemy, your own command is shifting. Rumour says reinforcements are coming in and your unit will rotate north for rest. You and Jesse exchange a look. Rest usually just means a different flavour of misery, but it's better than this. Before dark, a runner arrives with something in a sealed envelope. The medic calls your name. You take the letter, fingers numb, and break the wax with your thumbnail. It's from Levi. His handwriting is sloppy, weak, but alive. Still breathing, still ugly, they're sending me north. Said I'll walk again if I'm stubborn. Guess I'm stubborn. Hope you're still standing. You read it twice, then fold it carefully and tuck it into your coat's inner pocket, right behind the harmonica. You go on a watch again after nightfall. No action, just the distant echo of gunfire miles away and the rustling of trees whispering things you don't want to hear. You grip your musket and look up at the stars. They were different tonight. Not colder, not brighter, just less indifferent. And you don't know if it's because the war is shifting or because something inside you is, but either way, you stand there, boots planted in the same trench that tried to kill you yesterday, and realise, for now, you've won. Not the war, not the cause, just this day, and somehow that's enough. The train station isn't really a stallion. It's a splintering platform bolted to a barn surrounded by churned mud and shattered fence posts. There's a leaning telegraph pole nearby, its wires tangled like a drunk's shoelaces, and a sign that once said the town's name, now shot to pieces. Just 2 letters and a bullet hole, but to you it might as well be the golden gates of heaven, because it means you're leaving. You and Jesse stand in line with what's left of your unit. Bedrolls over shoulders as rifles slung, packs light enough to not count as luggage. A few fresh-faced replacements stand behind you, so new they haven't figured out where to clip their canteens. They smell clean. You don't trust them. The sergeant waves his list, calls out names. Some are answered with grunts, others with silence. You flinch when he says Wallace, and the kid doesn't respond. You turn slightly, see his empty spot 2 heads behind you, and remember how quiet the campfire was the night before. No one had said anything. You hadn't asked. The boxcar clatters in around noon, iron wheels screeching, engine puffing steam like a dragon on its last breath. The car smells like hay and rust. No seats, just benches bolted along the walls and old barrels chained to the corners. You climb in, find a spot near a shattered window, and slide down the wall with your pack as a cushion. Jesse sits opposite, tilting his hat over his eyes. "You reckon it's real rest?" he asks. You shrug. As long as no one's shooting at me, they can call it whatever they want. And here's your historical fact for the day. As the war dragged on, rotating battle-worn units to quieter regions became standard practice, at least in theory. Rest often meant guard duty, trench work, or shivering through storms in a different patch of mud, but it also meant new clothes, new food, and a few precious days where no one expected you to charge into hell. The train jolts to life, lurching forward with a groan. You pass the time watching the countryside roll by, fields left fallow. Barns collapsed, fences broken. Everything feels abandoned, like the war swallowed the whole map and forgot to spit anything back out. You pass a homestead where a white sheet flaps from a chimney like a surrender flag. Or maybe just someone airing their laundry. You don't know anymore. Midway through the ride, the train stops unexpectedly. The officer says nothing. You hear voices arguing outside, fast, tense. Then you're ordered off, single file. You grab your gear and hop down into the mud again, boots squelching. A supply wagon sits stuck in a ditch near the track. The driver's panicking, wheels sunk deep, axle groaning. There's talk of Confederate scouts nearby, and they can't risk leaving supplies behind. Guess who gets to help? You and the others work for an hour dragging crates from the wagon and loading them onto the train. It's mostly flour, salt, and artillery parts. One box tips open and reveals a stash of soap, real wrapped soap, the kind with labelling. Jesse pockets one with a grin and says, "Guess I'll be smelling like roses at my funeral. You laugh harder than you should." As you work, a group of civilians passes by, refugees maybe. A woman leads 2 children barefoot across the grass, their clothes torn, their eyes blank. She doesn't speak. No one does. You just nod as they walk past, like ghosts. Here's your fringe fact. During the war, train lines became lifelines, delivering everything from ammunition to pickled eggs to field hospitals, but they also became targets. Tracks were sabotaged, engines hijacked, bridges blown. Soldiers sometimes rode with their rifles cocked the whole way, just in case. Eventually, you get back on board. The train rattles north through the hills, stopping briefly at a junction guarded by cavalry with mismatched uniforms. You sleep through most of it, your head against the wall, dreams twitching it all, just out of reach. By nightfall, you arrive. The rest camp is a patch of pasture wrapped in wooden fencing and flanked by 2 hills and a stream. It's not exactly the lap of luxury, but it doesn't smell like death or powder, so it's already an upgrade. Tents dot the field like ghost sails, and there's a proper mester tent too. White canvas stretched tight over stacked crates and folding tables. They feed you hot stew. You almost cry here. You eat with both hands, burning your mouth, barely chewing. Jesse groans with happiness as he shovels it in. "I'd marry whoever made this," he says, licking his spoon. "You'd marry the spoon," you mutter. "You're not picky." After dinner, you're issued a new coat. It doesn't fit. The sleeves are short and the back's too wide, but it smells like clean wool instead of blood and mildew. You slip it on anyway and feel 20 pounds lighter. Then come new socks, dry, white. You stare at them for a full minute before putting them on, afraid they'll disappear. And now for the debate. What was the psychological effect of rest camps? Some historians argue they saved lives, gave men a chance to breathe, recover, reconnect. Others say they made it harder to return to battle, like letting your wounds scar just enough to feel pain again. You wonder if it's both. If knowing what comfort could feel like just made the next march harder. You and Jessie take a walk up the hill after dark. The stars are out. The stream gurgles somewhere below. Fireflies blink in the grass like old-time lanterns trying to guide you home. Neither of you speaks much. At the top of the hill, you stop and sit on a flat rock, just letting the air wash over you. The breeze doesn't smell like smoke or sweat. It smells like pine, fresh, clean. For the first time in weeks, you take off your boots and socks and just let your feet breathe. The grass is cool beneath them. Jessie does the same. You both sit there, bare feet in the dirt, like two kids who've forgotten the war for a few stolen minutes. Now for your last fact of the night. Some regiments in rest camps held talent shows, dances, mock trials, even fake elections for camp president. Not because they were silly, but because it reminded them they were still people. Not just soldiers, not just survivors. You lie back in the grass and stare up at the stars again. And tonight, for once, they don't seem so far away. You can already tell the break's over when the officer walks through camp with his hat pulled low and that stiff, businesslike way of moving people in the military always get when they're about to ruin your morning. You and Jessie are halfway through washing your shirts in the icy stream, both of you ankle deep, muttering about how soap shouldn't freeze, when the bugle sounds from the field above. A few seconds later, someone yells, "Pack up, we're moving out!" And just like that, peace is over. You wring out your shirt and sling it over your shoulder, still wet. The socks you just got dry yesterday are going back into boots that haven't stopped smelling like trench rot. Jessie sighs, quietly, like a man preparing to fall back into a hole he just crawled out of. Neither of you says much as you return to your tent and start packing. There's no use complaining. Not now, not anymore. As you're stuffing your blanket into your pack, you spot the folded letter from Levi still tucked inside. You take a moment, sit on your heels and read it again. Those shaky, stubborn words scratched out in uneven lines. He says they're sending him to a hospital in the Maryland. Says he's eating better now, that he might keep the leg after all. Says he misses the smell of campfire, and even Jessie's snoring. You laugh a little at that. Jessie calls from outside, "You ready?" And you nod, even though you're not. Here's your historical fact for the march ahead. Most Civil War soldiers spent more time walking than fighting. A soldier might march over 1,000 miles during the war, often with packs weighing 50 pounds or more. They marched through sleet, mud, dust and heat. They marched hungry, they marched wounded. They marched because if they didn't, someone else would die for it. The route this time is east, toward the border where two rivers meet, and beyond that, a town that's changed hands more times than anyone can count. The road is a mess. Flooded creeks, broken bridges, patches of deep clay that suck at your boots like they're hungry. You march single file, shoulders hunched against the wind, a line of trudging ghosts with rifles instead of chains. The replacement recruits groan. One of them tries to hitch a ride on the supply wagon and gets yelled at so hard by the quartermaster that he nearly falls over trying to scramble down. You and Jessie just keep walking. There's a rhythm to it now, one foot, then the next, one more breath. Repeat. Repeat again. You pass an old battlefield near midday, one you weren't part of but recognise all the same. Rows of simple wooden crosses, crooked and weathered. One has a tin cup nailed to the post. Another has no name, just sun. Jessie touches his hat as you pass, and you do the same. Midway through the march, you stop for water at a burned-out farmhouse. The well's still working, and a few soldiers pump buckets up while others sit in the grass and rub their feet. You find a cracked ceramic bowl near the collapsed barn and use it to scoop water. It tastes clean, cold, the kind of taste that reminds you what thirst really is. Here's your fringe fact for today. Some soldiers carried small, strange tokens on the march, good luck charms, rabbit feet, religious medallions, even miniature coffins carved from bone. Superstition ran deep. If death was always just around the corner, some figured you might as well bring something weird to guard your back. As the march drags on, conversation fades. Feet blister. Lips crack. The replacement kid behind you mutters a lullaby under his breath for miles, over and over. No one asks him to stop. If anything, the repetition helps. By sunset, you finally arrive, if you can call it that. The town you were headed to isn't really a town anymore. It's a husk. Buildings burned out or half collapsed. Chimneys standing alone like grave markers. The few civilians left stare at you from porches and windows, hollow-eyed and silent. No cheers, no waving flags, just people watching a new round of tired soldiers shuffle in to replace the last ones who bled here. You're told to dig in near a church that somehow still stands. Jesse grunts as he drops his pack near the overgrown cemetery beside it. You follow, eyeing the tilted headstones with a certain reluctant respect. It's a place where the dead already live. You're just visiting. Dinner is salt pork and hardtack again. You chew slowly, trying not to break a tooth. Someone behind you is singing low, some gospel tune with no words, just sounds that echo in the throat and vibrate through your ribs. It's not pretty, but it feels human. It feels alive. Afterward, Jesse pulls you aside. "You ever think about after?" he asks. "After what?" "This, the war?" You blink. The question feels as out of place, wrong even, like asking what comes after breathing. "Sometimes," you say. "Yeah, me too, can't picture it though, feels like this is it, all I've ever done." You nod. Because what do you say to that? He's right. You've spent so long surviving that the idea of living seems like a rumour. That brings us to the scholarly debate of the day. Were Civil War veterans more likely to struggle with reintegration than soldiers in later wars? Some historians argue yes, because the country itself was fractured, and coming home didn't mean safety or peace. Others point to later wars as having greater psychological tolls due to scale. The truth? Every war breaks its survivors differently. The pieces just scatter in different places. You volunteer for night watch again. Not because you want to, but because you don't trust anyone else to keep their eyes open. You stand near the edge of the cemetery, rifle slung across your chest, the moon throwing pale shadows through the twisted fence. In the stillness, you hear owls, crickets, the wind brushing the cracked windows of the church, like it's trying to get inside. You think about the harmonica in your pocket. You don't play it. Not tonight. Tonight's too quiet. Instead, you lean against the fence post, one hand resting on the stock of your musket, and you wait. For morning, for orders, for the next breath. You wake to gunfire, but it's not yours, not this time. It's distant, sporadic. Like the war is having one last tantrum before finally deciding it's had enough. Jesse's already on his feet by the time you sit up, boots half-laced and eyes squinting toward the tree line. There's smoke out there. Not much, but enough to raise the question, are we about to fight again, or is someone else just finishing what we started? The answer, surprisingly, comes fast. A rider gallops into camp, coat flapping, mud flying off his horse's hooves like a second storm. He doesn't dismount. Just yells one word so loud it shatters the quiet. "Surrender!" There's a beat. No one moves. No one reacts. It's too absurd, too sudden. You're still chewing yesterday's stale biscuit, and now the war is over? He says it again. Lee surrendered. Appomattox. It's over. Now the camp stirs. A few men drop what they're doing. Someone curses, loud and long, like they don't know whether to be relieved or offended. You stare at the rider like he might vanish if you blink. Jesse crosses his arms and mutters, "I'll believe it when they stop shooting." But even as he says it, the sounds of battle fade, swallowed by wind and distance. Here's your historical fact of the final day. General Robert E. Lee surrendered to Ulysses S. Grant at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9, 1865, effectively ending the Civil War. But word didn't travel instantly. For days, sometimes weeks, soldiers kept fighting, dying, and waiting in limbo, because no one told them it was over. Wars don't always end with a final gunshot. Sometimes they just run out of steam. You sit down on a nearby log, not sure what to feel. Jesse lights a piece of dried grass with a match and tosses it into the dirt. "So that's it?" he asks. "We just go home?" "Home?" you repeat, like the word's foreign. "If it's still there." You wander the camp as the news settles in. Some men cheer, others cry. One kneels in the grass and whispers something into his hands, rocking slowly like he's trying to hold himself together with prayer. Another digs his canteen out of his pack, unscrews it, and pours the whole thing onto the ground. Maybe for the dead, maybe just because he finally can. But you just sit. You think about Levi, somewhere up north, hopefully learning to walk again. You think about Wallace, buried in an unmarked grave near a town that doesn't even exist anymore. You think about the harmonica still in your pocket, the will folded inside your coat, and you think, now what? Later that day, the captain calls the remaining company together. What's left of it, anyway. He doesn't make a speech, he just reads names off a list. Some for mustering out, some for escort duty, some for burial detail. Yours is called last. Discharge pending, he says, then folds the paper like it weighs 50 pounds and walks away. The next few days feel directionless. You're still armed, still uniformed, but the urgency's gone. The war's over, but you haven't been told to stop yet. You help pack up the camp, roll tents, dig up stakes, load carts with the precision of men who don't know how else to live. Now for today's odd little footnote. After the surrender, some Confederate units refused to believe it, some fought on for weeks. A handful escaped to Mexico, and a few, no kidding, planned to sail to Brazil and start a new Confederate colony. Spoiler alert, it didn't go well. The war was over, but the denial ran deep. You're sent north with a small group to return supplies. The journey's slow. You pass towns where the flags are already back up, white cloths pulled down, children playing in dirt yards like nothing ever happened. One woman offers you bread from her windowsill. You take it, thank her, keep walking. Eventually you make it to a proper demobilization camp. There's paperwork, questions. The doctor checks your pulse, your eyes, your teeth. He asks if you can read and write. You say yes. He nods and writes functional on a line, like that sums up everything you've become. You're handed your final pay in coins and scrip, a discharge paper, and a railway voucher. A man at a desk says, "Congratulations, Private, you made it." You don't know how to respond, so you just nod. That night you and Jesse sit together for the last time. Two battered soldiers on a bench at the edge of a camp that doesn't want either of you anymore. He tells you he's headed west. Heard about a cousin with land, might try ranching, something with cows. You, he asks. You shrug. Might head home, see if the roof's still there. And then he hands you something. The harmonica. I played it all I can, you carry it now. You don't argue, you just nod and slip it into your coat. Here's the scholarly debate to end on. What defines survival in war? Is it making it home with your body intact, with your mind, with your soul? Some say the Civil War created the first generation of modern veterans, men who came back strangers, carrying stories no one wanted to hear. Others say it forged a nation's character in fire and blood. The truth? It did both. And neither. Survival isn't about what you bring back. It's what you carry forward. Your train pulls in the next morning. Jesse claps your shoulder and disappears without a goodbye. That's how men like him do it. You board with your pack, your discharge, and your war behind you. The train rumbles forward, smoke rises, fields roll past. Somewhere out there is a house that may or may not be standing. A family that may or may not be waiting. A town that remembers your name, or never knew it. You ride in silence, the harmonica warm in your hand. You survived. Not unchanged, not whole, but you survived. And now, for the first time in what feels like forever, you start to wonder if that's enough. You're home before you realise it. The train ride ends at a station that barely resembles the one you left from. New faces, new boards, same smell of coal and wet earth. You step off slow, boots hitting wood like they aren't used to solid ground anymore. The war feels like it's still clinging to your coat, your hair, your bones, but no one looks at you like a soldier. Just another man coming off the rail. The road from the station is mostly empty. A few carts pass. A kid on a fence stares at you, chewing straw. Probably not old enough to know what war smells like. You nod, doesn't nod back. That's fair. When you reach your old street, your heart goes a little sideways. The trees are taller than you remember. The house is still standing. The porch has a new railing. There's laundry on the line, real laundry. Bright shirts and little socks flapping in the breeze. The door opens before you knock. Your sister stands there with flour in her hands and tears in her eyes. She doesn't say your name, just throws her arms around you and hugs like she's trying to hold all the broken pieces together. You let her. Later, she shows you to the room that used to be yours. It's been cleaned, dusted. There's a fresh sheet on the bed, and the walls don't feel like they're closing in. You sit on the edge, pull the harmonica from your coat pocket, and set it on the windowsill. And for the first time in a long time, you exhale. Here's one final strange truth from the records. Years after the Civil War ended, some veterans kept sleeping on the floor, afraid the bed was too soft. Others never stopped flinching at thunder. A few refused to wear grey or blue again, any shade, any time. You don't know what kind of survivor you'll be, not yet. But you know this much. You're done. You can stop marching. The night comes gently, you lie back, stare at the ceiling and let your body rest, really rest. No rifles, no boots, no fog, just quiet. You made it. And maybe, just maybe you're finally allowed to heal.